All right, hello YouTube. This is Voice of Freedom here. I'm here with Pave Darker. We'll be talking about the Brexit situation, the butthurt fallout that is happening because of it, and I guess just a couple nice things about that. So, how you doing, Pave?
Oh, not too bad. The sky hasn't fallen in. David Cameron might have been telling us a few porkies. And things are actually looking all right. And people aren't saying this. People aren't coming out and admitting once and for all that, you know, it's not a disaster. But hopefully people will start to catch up to it soon. And, we'll start on our journey of wherever we're going. I mean, it's an exciting time. I can't understand why people aren't getting more sort of into the spirit of it and saying, well, fuck it. We've had this status quo for the last 40 years. Let's try something new.
Right, and I don't understand it either. It seems almost like a state of delusion where you have to kind of really pull and grasp at straws in order to find a bad outcome here.
Well, the biggest thing that you're going to see is it's mainly the young vote. And the reason they're pissed off is because they can't travel around Europe anymore. The reality is, with a lot of them, they weren't fucking traveling around Europe in the first place. It's not a question of there is this thing that I used to do. There are people, don't get me wrong. I've got friends and it's affected them, and I feel really bad for them. Because some people that was how they made their living. You know, they went over to Europe for 6 months, worked there, came back, and just kind of bounced around. And for those people, yes, it's a big impact, and I completely understand how they're feeling about the situation. But for the majority of people that are complaining, they're the same people that didn't vote. They're the same people that weren't using all of these wonderful rights that they claim that they have lost now. They haven't lost fucking anything in reality because the crash that is going to be coming for the EU is going to be historic. You
God,
look
yeah.
around at situations like 50% youth unemployment in several EU countries, negative economic growth. You've got a situation where bailouts are coming. We've been told that if we'd stayed in, we would have been exempt from them. But then what happens? Nobody in Europe has got any money. And when you end up in a situation like that, you end up with borrowing and borrowing and more borrowing. And then the whole fucking thing will come down. And this is what people aren't getting. It was not a question of this will be better for Britain. It was a question of avoiding what was coming for Britain down the line and what certain people had been able to see and predict was coming and getting out before the iceberg hit, so to speak.
The incoming collapse. And it's funny. I noticed the same thing. It's all millennials. It's all people under 30. And
Mm.
amazingly, even my friends over here in the United States, a lot of my British friends uh, were completely against it, and they're shocked, saying that they're like dismayed and horrified with their country. And my question to them is, dude, aren't you just happy to have your independence back? I mean, do you have no sense of patriotism left? And really, it's always the same. They're all expats. They're all living in the United States, or they're living in Germany or Brussels, or they were Americans that became British. I mean, just crazy stuff like this. And yeah, sure, okay, so you might have to show a passport, but come on, the EU's only been around for what, like the better part of 50 years or so.
Mm.
And you mean to tell me that people didn't freely travel throughout Europe before that?
It's always going to be difficult to contextualize because you've got the situation of the jet set lifestyle occurred around the same time that the initial rumblings of the EU were forming.
Right.
So as a result, you had a situation where these two things were very much tied together. And to the British, holidays in Spain, France, etc., these are kind of your standard operating patterns because it the advantage of the EU is it made it cheap enough to go on holiday there. So rather than having domestic holidays, all of a sudden we were all flying over to the continent. Staying in Benidorm is a particularly popular one with English people. It's quite horrible because it's basically just English pubs transplanted into Spain, but it became very easy to go to the continent. People got used to that idea, and that is the one thing that I will admit that they are kind of losing for the time being. But what they don't get is that this is going to change and this is going to shift, and this is a it's going to be a major event in geopolitics. It's going to change the way everything works in the future. I mean, you've got countries lining up to leave now. Sweden want to get out. Um, you can bet your ass Italy are going to want to get
Oh
out
God,
because
yeah.
they're absolutely screwed. They are practically bankrupt. And I look around at this and I think, if they have, if these countries have 50% youth unemployment, this whole thing of we're going to come, we're going to work over in Europe,
It's
are there any
bullshit.
jobs there to begin with?
Exactly. It's utter bullshit.
What are you missing out on? But you have this indoctrination in the youth these days that I don't want to sound like an old fucking fart or something, but they have this thing in their head that in some way it's almost like they want to be led. They are sleepwalking into fascism and they are doing it gladly. And that, for me, is what the EU represented. It was something, you look at the way it was building itself up, it was creating borders with the Schengen zone, it had a flag, it had a national anthem,
Ode to
all
joy,
of
right?
these things. And a single currency, lack of internal borders, it was moving towards a single state. And that's scary. That is the USSR all over again. And we all know what happened last time there was a USSR.
Oh yeah. I mean, what was it? Over 50 million dead
Yeah.
in Russia alone.
And this is what socialism always does, and this is what the EU was moving towards. It is a fundamentally socialist concept when you think about it. It is a case of, here's um, poorer countries like Romania that haven't got a lot, and then there's bigger countries like Britain, and you're saying, well, we're going to take a large chunk of your money and we're going to give it to them. And in theory, that's a really nice idea, but the problem is you create these almost slave nations that are absolutely beholden to EU money. So when the EU eventually collapses, God only knows what they're going to do. And also, what it's done by creating this block and this border around it and this barrier that they've created with the tariffs and what have you, which, let's be honest, these days aren't really that high anyway. So I don't know what people are freaking out about.
A couple of
But
pennies
what it's
compared
done
to.
over the years, it's made all the countries that weren't part of the EU bloc poor because they can't get into the party, they can't get into the free trade zone. So what it kind of does, it kind of beats countries down to the point where they are extremely poor, they have no economic prospects, and then eventually they get sucked into the cult of the EU, and then they're reliant on bailouts, they're reliant on money, they get tied into this bloody currency that is going to rip its way through Europe. God only knows what the consequences are going to be next time there's a crash on that one. And that is coming. Believe me, that is coming. You look at the data, and there's no way that that currency is not going to crash in the
You
near
know,
future.
it's funny too because all these countries have this little game they play with devaluing the currency. Now, what the fuck is going to happen when there's only one currency to devalue?
This is the issue. And the other problem that you have is, I mean, if you look at the economic model and you look at the original Maastricht Treaty and the way things were set out, there were convergence criteria that had to be met. Your economies had to be in sync with each other. The problem that you have is that as time went on, they wanted to make it bigger, so they started relaxing and relaxing and relaxing these convergence criteria. And the difficulty with a single currency is that you have to have all these massively different economies. And normally, what you would do if your currency starts to crash, if you're having financial problems, you play around with interest rates, you play around with the supply of money, and you rig the system to fix it and put things back on an even keel. But you can't do that when you're locked into a single currency. So if one country starts to fail, they can't do what would normally be the classic economic fixes to actually put themselves right again. Because if they do that, they're not fuck up the currency for everybody else. And that's the problem of tying everything into this idea of a single currency, is that it's like having, I don't know, do you remember when you used to get separate hi-fis where you had an amplifier and you had a CD player and you had this bit and that bit? And the beauty of them is if one of them went bandy, you could fix it
The rest would work.
without having the whole thing go down. Individual components are allow you so much greater fine tuning control. And this was the brilliance of the EEC when it first came out because it was just a trading block. They didn't piss about with single currencies and governance and all this sort of stuff. It was designed to create cooperation between countries to get better prices for the products that they were selling. But then they started all this shit with the common agricultural policy, piling up lakes of wine, buying up vast quantities of butter and sticking them in warehouses because then it drives the price up. And that's the problem. The EU is it's a series of shadow games. It's designed to make itself look very good, when in reality they're doing all this stuff behind the scenes that's just fixing it.
Yeah, and there's a distinct lack of oversight too. It seems that these are just unelected officials that don't really report to anybody. There's no real watchdog group that's allowed indoors. There's no real say from the Tories or anybody else.
It's this is the difficulty you're always going to have as well. I mean, you look back through the history of the EU, and it is a series of ignored vetoes, ignored referendums. People say this is not the way we want it to go, and then the EU goes, "I'm sorry, this is the way it's going to go. Deal with it." And that's not a democratic way to run a system. On top of that, the commission that actually creates the laws and what have you is not the same as the parliament. All the parliament can actually do, and all our MEPs can actually do, is either it's very similar to the powers that the president has in America. They can agree to legislation, they can debate legislation, or they can veto legislation. That's all they can do. They can't create a policy.
Interesting.
And you've got this classic thing that people have always done over the years of tagging something into something that's essential. So, if, say, for example, you want to get your health care bill passed, for example, then you might want to tack on something that's going to keep the NRA happy, if you see what I'm saying, and you want to get it through Congress.
Yeah, the exact same thing
Uh,
happened here.
and
Yeah,
the problem with the EU is once something has been put in place, it can never be undone. There's no way to sort of repeal existing. This is why Juncker is saying there will be no further negotiations. There can't be any further negotiations
wow.
because once something is in place, that's it.
So it's like written in stone. There's no referendum to be had. There's
Referendums have been had in the past. I mean, for example, the Greeks didn't want to take austerity measures. They wanted to come out of the euro, and they were told, "I'm sorry, but you can't. Your country will be allowed to fall into ruin because our project is more important than your country." And that's again coming back to this idea of the EU as being a socialist construct because it is very much about the individual does not matter. I mean, we've seen this over the last few years with feminism, with a lot of these more sort of radical leftist movements. It's the idea that the individual doesn't matter. Your voice is not important. The British representation within the European Parliament has 10% of the votes. You can't, considering what we put in, you have no control. You have no real say because I mean, with a 10% vote, yeah, you can swing something that's close, but you can't ever have the force to sort of push something through. It just won't work. Um, and you might consider it sort of selfish reasons to sort of jump out and say, well, we can't be doing this anymore, we can't be carrying you anymore, and what have you. But the reality is, it's not a question of we can't be carrying you. It's a question of this organization is bad. It's it's founded on broken logic. It's hemorrhaging money. It's not long term feasible. And for want of a better word, it's almost like we're doing the world a favor. We're starting this off because nobody wants to be the first person to get up on the dance floor. So we are going to be the first ones to leave. And as I say, you see other countries are lining up now to go. If it is such a wonderful thing, why are they all so desperate to get out?
if it's such a wonderful thing, why are they in such ruin to begin with? And I think you're right. I think this is a very interesting time to be alive. Um, I made some correlations the other day to the year 1775 and 1776 when the United States left the UK, or which would that be England. The same arguments. The economy will collapse. The British will come in and burn the whole place to the ground. We can't manage a country. We don't even have politicians. We don't know what we're doing. And we turned out all right. I mean, there's been plenty of countries that have seceded from other nations or larger conglomerations that are perfectly great as superpowers now.
Mm. At the end of the day, this concept of war that was brought up so many times, we have a seat on NATO as a country. We are this tiny little island. We have a seat on the UN Security Council, not NATO.
Yes.
What am I saying? Um, we are not going to be invaded by the continent of Europe. Not only that, but I mean, Christ, if the continent of Europe was to say, you know what, tomorrow we're going to invade Syria and take it over, they would be stopped by America. Um, well, France,
Israel,
for starters,
Russia.
couldn't take any of those kind of actions without consulting the council, and it just wouldn't happen. It's fucking fairy tales of a world where, no, there's too many blocks in place. It would never ever happen. Don't get me wrong, there's going to be hostility because that's the French.
Of course.
They are very, very, they bear grudges. I mean, you've heard the stories probably of English sheep being taken over and set fire to,
No, actually.
because the French were sort of protesting, as they do.
That's great.
They are a very spiky people. We love them. Don't get me wrong, we love the French, but they are a very spiky people when they're in a mood with you. Yeah, they're going to be a bit funny for a while. The whole situation with the Channel Tunnel makes things very interesting because it's the one connection there. I do wonder whether or not it'll be kept open. If not, then what does that mean? You have to think with these things, it's not just tourism that's used for; it's used for trade, transport, etc., etc.
Right.
So if Europe changes, does that change? But there's so many variables, and people keep coming out saying there's no plan, there's no plan, there's no plan. There will be right now. The government is kind of running in neutral. The engine is on tick over. They're trying to work out what's going on, and people blame the levers, but the reality is the original Prime Minister Cameron should have had a plan for this. It
Oh
was
yeah.
fucking arrogant of him to sit there and go, I don't need to plan because the British people are going to vote my way.
Right. And my understanding is that they have a history of, hey, you didn't vote right. Let's vote again.
The EU, yes. I am genuinely surprised that they've let this go ahead. I think that it's monumental because so many times in the past, every now and again they will listen to a referendum, but if it goes against their overall goals, um, doesn't they generally tend to shoot things down. So the fact that they're allowing this to go ahead, they're pushing us to pull out immediately. To be honest with you, I don't think we're going to pull out immediately because the reality is the longer we put off triggering Article 50, the better a negotiating position we are in because Europe is unraveling by the day as we
Oh yeah.
speak. So if we pull out now, they are in a position to dictate terms. We
Yeah.
give it a week or two, give it a couple of months, the instability that's going through Europe now, they will give us a significantly better deal. So anybody with half a brain can see that we need to get things sorted in terms of who's actually leading the country because we've not got a prime minister at the moment. We need to get that person picked, put into office. We need to put together an actual cabinet so we know what we're doing going forward. I mean, we've had all these Labour resignations today. Everything is in absolute turmoil. So you need to get your house in order before you pick up and start moving. You need to get all the boxes packed. You need to get it sorted, and you need somebody to oversee this. And that's what they're kind of scrambling to do at the moment. Personally, I'd like to see it be Boris. Everybody's been very kind of unpleasant towards him over the last couple of weeks, but I think he's done a lot for this country. I think he could do well in a leadership role. He's not the farcical fool that he portrays himself as. He is a damn sight smarter than that. It is just a character. Um, but I think he could do really well. I'm kind of pissed off at the way people have turned seemingly shut Nigel Farage completely out of everything.
Yeah.
Disagree with the man's politics if you will, but show him some fucking respect because without him we wouldn't have this. He has been campaigning for this for the last 20 years. The reality is, no, maybe he should not be in charge. Maybe it shouldn't be a Farage government, but show the man some fucking respect because this would not have happened without that man.
Agreed. And I've seen a lot of slime thrown at the guy. I mean, I don't know much about UK politics or much about the people, but it seems very unfair that the guy who masterminded this entire liberation movement here is suddenly thrown to the coals, you know?
Isn't that always the way, though? I mean, you look at situations throughout history. Farage is an easy way for the politicians that are going forward with leave to contain the contagion. They can say, oh, well, all the racism was coming from over there. But the reality is, there is a bit of that undercurrent going on in Britain right now, and it fucking pisses me off. What we have to look at this as is a new opportunity. We are a multicultural society and we should accept that, but everybody's got to kind of fall in line with the British way of thinking, get on board, and the Poles, the Romanian people that are here already, that are contributing something, that have jobs, that go out, work, pay taxes, are welcome as far as I'm concerned. This was not a question of us saying, right, England is for the English. No, no, fuck all that. That is small-minded, narrow-minded crap. It was a question of we have this great big tap from Europe leaking huge quantities of immigration into this country on a daily basis, and we have no shut-off valve for that. We can't control it. And you do reach a point where immigration, we need to get the numbers down. It needs to be in the tens of thousands. It might be 50,000 one year, it might be 15,000 another year, it might be 90,000 another year, but it's the ability to control how much you have coming in. And the reality is, with the likes of Turkey set to join the EU, let's be brutally
Oh
honest, it's
God.
happening.
Yeah.
There's been leaked memos, there's so much information out there. Turkey are joining. Um, You've got these other four nations that are coming in with them as well. That's a lot of people. And at the moment, we have immigration of 330,000. It's not sustainable. We have a population the size of France in an island that's less than a third of the size of that country. It's crazy. We have to reach a point, but that doesn't mean that the people that are here aren't welcome. They are more than welcome. And I think one of the great strengths with Britain is that a lot of people do come in and they integrate well with the society because it's open. But that doesn't mean that you have to lose border control. I mean, you guys are having this whole argument over in America with Trump at the moment. It's not racist to say we want control over our borders. Nobody is saying that we're not going to let Poles, French, Italians, whatever, in after this referendum is done and after we're out, but we can choose which ones we do let in. We can make sure that we get the best possible people. And if you've got 330,000, yeah, 170,000 that comes from other parts of the world. But guess what? If you've got no control over this 170,000 over here,
What
let's say
makes
we
you
kept
think?
things at the
Yeah.
same level. Now, if that 170,000 that's coming from Europe suddenly decides, well, this year you're going to have 330,000 people coming in, then we have to completely shut off the rest of the world in order to facilitate that. That's not a good way to be. Turning around to India and saying, no, we're not having any of your doctors. Turning around to Australia, turning around to America and saying, we don't want your best people because we have this uncontrollable landslide of people coming in from Europe. That is more isolationist. It's saying, no, I just want this group of people coming in rather than give everybody a fair shot. And there's a lot of Indian families over here that get very pissed off with it because they can't get their relatives over because there's this amazingly complex immigration policy for them. But anyone from Europe can just stroll in. And that's not an even playing field. And one thing Britain has always been about, say what you will, and I know it's fucking cliche, but we play by the rules. We are honest people, it was always a question of honor. I mean, even don't get me wrong, the situation with the empire and what have you was not cool. What they did to those people, not cool. But you have to ask the question: why do Indians still, in spite of the empire, why do they still speak English over there? Why do they love cricket? Why are they absolute Anglophiles? Because we left those places to a certain extent in a better condition than what they started with. It wasn't strip mining, it wasn't this. Yeah, things have exploded over in India right now, and there have been for a long time, and there is serious issues with population. But India is not some backwards nation. There is a lot of industry out there. There's a lot of development. People see sort of shanty towns and they think that's what India is. It's not. There are bustling metropolises over there. It's insane.
Yeah, and if I could just go back and expound on something real quick, everything you just said is very much similar, if not the same, with the current controversy we're having here in the United States. We're not saying, hey, I don't know, Paco that runs I don't know, the let's call it the gas station down the street, right? He's a legal immigrant. Yeah, we have no problem with him being here. He came here legally. He's got his papers. He went through the right processes. Yeah, no, glad to have him. But when we have situations where you have people who don't speak the language, who we can't vet, who have no idea where they came from, just pouring over the borders, and God knows, what they're bringing with them. The vast majority of them come over the border, usually escorted by cartel members. A lot of them are forced to carry drugs with them. And even though Trump got a lot of flack for saying that these Mexicans that are coming over the border are rapists or whatever, this, that, and the other, well, that sounds quite xenophobic until you look at
Well, to
and
be fair, he said they were a disproportionate
yeah, exactly,
representation within the
exactly.
population. In other words, you almost come back to the Ramsey Paul thing of it's a war on noticing things. Um, Patterns. You have all of this going on, particularly with Black Lives Matter. You over in America right now, you show them data that says, look, this is statistical data, this is what's happening. No,
13%
no,
of the
that's
population
racist.
commits 60% of the crime. That's a racist number. But again, these numbers don't lie. And very much so, Trump hit something on the head that nobody else wanted to talk about.
Mm.
80% of women coming over that border get raped while crossing over Mexico or any one of those countries they're leaving. To the point where the vast majority of them actually get birth control shots. And the Huffington Post even did an article on this that you can look up with the 80% number. And it links over to Amnesty International, which has the number at 60%. But the more accurate number is 80%, which is actually collected by Fusion Network from their crisis homes along the border where they treat these women. And it's a shocking number to the point where the Mexican government even has a whole wing of policemen that all they do is deal with this kind of crime and the sex slave operations all along the border.
It all comes back to this cultural Marxist idea that all cultures are equal and you can't say anything bad about anything.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
And it's amazing to me because I can tell them, listen, I've worked as a missionary. I've been to these countries. And I can tell you firsthand, being there and dealing with victims and dealing with people who live this every day, you go to any Latin American country, it's a shithole, man. It's usually nothing but corruption. The government is barely existent. They're the biggest gangsters out there, and the people are largely left to fend for themselves. So, no, nothing that is being said is anywhere off topic. And honestly, there's a reason they're leaving these countries to come here. They're leaving those countries because they are lawless nations, and they're coming to a nation of laws because they want the benefits of the law, but they're breaking the law to get it. And that's hypocrisy to me.
Mhm. And also, it's the same issue that we're having with the migrant crisis in Europe at the moment. The reality is, you are taking people from a culture where all they know is the lash,
Right.
where it is a very barbaric culture. Now, that is not a judgment on the person themselves,
No.
but if you condition somebody under a system like that, they are going to treat that as their normal to a certain extent. And if you rapidly try to insert a huge number of these people in at once, there is no time to integrate them. So what tends to happen is they'll form up sort of like ghetto communities.
Right.
It will be very insulated. They haven't had proper opportunities to learn the language because they can't afford to give them all language tuition and all these kind of things. And that the population will naturally distance itself from everything that's around them. And, even rational people, even people that aren't fundamentally racist, are going to start to get worried when they suddenly find themselves being outnumbered in their own cities. And that is happening in certain places in Europe. You look at situations like Sweden. I mean, the population has totally, irrevocably shifted there. The Swedes will die out within a couple of generations, native born Swedes. The similar things are happening in Germany. It is a dying nation. They have reached a point now where their fertility and population replenishment is so small, they will die out within a couple of generations. native Germans. It's a really scary situation that we've got going on here. And again, it comes back to this thing. This is the problem with the EU. Merkel and Juncker made a decision, and everybody in the EU had to deal with it. She made this declaration, and then all of a sudden she turns around and says, "Oh, well, you're all going to have to take some."
Yeah, it's a suicide pact, and I don't understand it, but I guess it goes back to the whole. A lot of people blame it on the German guilt, but honestly, I think it has a lot more to do with the people who are behind these large international groups pulling the strings.
Creating conflict and distracting people from what's really going on.
Absolutely, and it's funny. One of the many things that I didn't want to necessarily accept when it started being brought up, mostly because it sounded a lot like conspiracy theory, was the idea that the American government is using ISIS and groups like this, along with other governments, to basically, I guess, turn Islamic terror into a form of social control. I gotta say, I'm starting to believe it now because you can't have situations like Orlando or situations like, say, the Boston bombing and all these others where, the media quite clearly is making up the majority of the facts.
Mm.
Where you have crisis actors, like, for example, the Sandy Hook shooting. One of the mothers was the same woman that can be seen in the Boston bombing pictures. She's the same woman that could be seen. I believe she was killed in another one as, oh God, what was it? I forgot what other terrorist attack it was.
You start to question. I understand what you're saying. I mean, I'm not necessarily one of those that believes necessarily that the rabbit hole goes all the way that deep, but you start to question wait, maybe it's not a question of they're setting the narrative so much as they're massaging the narrative. They're
Yeah,
adding a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit, and so on and so forth, just to sort of push it in the direction they want it to go without necessarily sort of, you know, doing these things. Things like, all these fucking conspiracy theories about what happened with Dynamo. And it's so complicated to set something like that up. I don't genuinely believe, by any stretch of imagination, that was done by the sort of US government and what have you.
and that I
Um,
think that's really where,
I
yeah,
believe they knew it was going to happen and they allowed it to
yes,
happen.
that's where I was going with this. Um, that's the beauty of the arrangement, though, isn't it? You have a group of people who truly believe in what they're doing. You don't really need to tell them what to do. It's like the old, Patton quote: "Don't tell people what to do. Give them a goal, and you'll be surprised with the results they come up with." You know,
Yuri referred to them as the useful idiots, if I
yes,
remember correctly.
yes. Yuri Bezmenov quoted Stalin about that. Yes,
Yeah. And that's the way it kind of sets up when you think about it, because these people are surprisingly easy to control when you really get down to it. You can push them in certain directions with very little prods, and I've found this. I mean, you look at something like Twitter, and you can drop a little stone in that lake, and you can
it will
watch the
cause a
ripples kick off
war.
of it, and you can see people, you can see narrative change on a pinpoint. You can trace it back to that moment where things set off in a different direction and you follow the stories. And this is why I've always said if you read one news site, you are not getting the news. You need to read the
All of them.
Huffington Post
Yeah.
take on it, the Washington Post take on it. You need to read Breitbart's take on it. You need to check what Fox News is saying from it. And you'll maybe get 10 to 15% of the real story out of each of them. And then you take those pieces away and you build your jigsaw.
That's the only way to do it. And it's funny. Recently, let me go back. Back in high school and all that. I'm 25 now, but I used to look at people like Alex Jones and go, "Oh my God, that guy is so fucking unhinged," you know. And then fast forward years later, a good 5, 10 years later, it's like, holy shit, he was right. And
I have to say I find Paul Joseph Watson a little bit more palatable than Alex Jones. Alex
you
Jones can
know,
go a little bit off the deep end sometimes,
sometimes I don't agree with
and
everything he
he
says.
loves
Yeah,
his power powders.
he definitely likes his rants. He definitely. I gotta say, it's very entertaining to me. Sometimes it can be a little much. I have to dose him out. But I do think that there definitely is an audience for him to be had, and I think that a lot of the stuff is his exposing, for lack of better words, without much help, has actually really launched a lot of people like Paul Joseph Watson, a lot of people like Gavin McGinnis, people who are really questioning the narrative and who are actually, putting rubber to the road and really getting actual footage of the shit actually happening. So I think there's even a place in this for conspiracy theories or conspiracy thought, because sometimes there's always a nugget of truth in there.
Yeah. I mean, you will get people that the tinfoil is strong with them, and they just cannot help but see these conspiracies all over the world, and it gets to a ridiculous point. But you have to take into account the fact that you have to accept that there are things that are going on in the world that you do not know about. And the
Mm-hmm.
reason you do not know about them is because there are more of these attacks that are going on that never get through. And if you were a government, is it sensible, if you manage to stop a terror attack, to go and tell the people,
Fuck
guess
no.
what, there was going to be a terror attack? Or is it better to just sweep it under the rug and pretend it never happened?
Right, and
There are things that go on that you will never hear about
you don't need to.
because
Yeah.
there will be bombs diffused in schools and things that the public do not need to know in order to keep them safe and keep them with the illusion that, the world is a nice place and so on and so forth. But
I think the facade is falling though, and what's amazing to me is that it gets more and more difficult to not be a conspiracy theorist when you have situations like Joe Cox, when you have situations like Orlando, within weeks of each other, with the same exact mo, the same exact outcome, and the same exact situation. Where you have an election coming up, you have a major event that's about to decide the future of this nation, and holy shit, suddenly the biggest, most unprecedented attack ever happens. Uh, the terrorist is killed, all 100% of the time. These guys are never recovered for intelligence. They're always the patsy, like, oh, it was a lone gunman. It's always, you know, um, and in situations like this, we have the Orlando shooting where, for example, initial reports, the majority of them, when they're interviewed, said that there were either multiple gunmen or they heard a barrage of bullets, where they were thought that there would be multiple gunmen or multiple guns at least. Um,
mm,
there was the guy who mentioned that the door was blocked. He said it, I think it was on MSNBC Live, and they flat out killed the Skype call.
killing 50 people in that short space of time and taking into account all the people he wounded as well, it is a lot for one man to do.
It is.
It would be a lot for a trained soldier to do.
Let me put it to you this way: I used to have an M4A3, which is basically the rifle he would have had. And I would go to the range every weekend. I joined the army. I got dropped for injuries before basic. It's not important, but I was training for it. So I would go to the range every weekend and drop upwards of 1,000 to 2,000 rounds per weekend. And let me tell you, even cranking that trigger as fast as you can to deliver that many aimed, accurate shots and have those kinds of results, it would take such focus, especially when you're thinking about you have no backup. People can rush you at any time. I mean, something's off about this. I mean, sure, I suppose it's not outside the realm of reason, but it's very improbable. And this door business, the door being held shut, and they cut the guy's Skype call and then
And the
pretend like,
fact that his wife's disappeared.
yes, and they pretend like, oh, we lost you, and the next story that they air is the fucking moron that was holding the door shut allegedly talking about he thought that it was the shooter, when the guy just before him had literally said that they were yelling through the door to let them out. So none of it makes any sense, you know.
No.
And I'm not saying that it didn't happen, because I can confirm at least two of the names on that list of people that I personally know that person. So I know people died. But when you have situations like when you watch those clips, when you see them pulling out the wounded, I mean, you mean to tell me that somebody has a bullet wound to the back or to the abdomen, and the blood stain is the size of a pancake? Or, that guy that they were carrying off with a bullet to the femur. Again, it looked like somebody drizzled ketchup on his leg and put a bandana over it. They're carrying him. They think they're off screen, and the guy just walks with him.
Yeah, it makes you question certain things. But then again, you have to think within these situations, it is possible that person is going to look at some kind of civil suit or something like this and faking the injuries and let it slip. You have to look at any of these kind of scenarios, and you have to. I think it's like the old house quote about hearing hoofs and assuming zebras. You if you push hard enough, you will find something
Of course.
in all of these situations. I mean, weird shit happens, stuff happens with cameras, and odd stuff does occur. Um, but it's when you have a conflagration of a lot of odd things in a very short space of time.
That's when
When you
it's, yeah.
have 10 or 15 red flags at a scene and you think, hmm, something's not right here.
Well, what's amazing to me is that, for example, they only interviewed, I believe, 3 or 4 people that were wounded. One of them took 4 bullets to the back and was sitting up perfectly straight, no pain, speaking with a normal speaking voice. You know, no real gauze or anything, no visible injuries, just as if nothing had happened. And then there was another girl, Patience. Sorry, Patience something or other. You can find her. It's this black girl sitting on, in her bed or whatever, describing what happened. Except for they all forgot to mention that she was affiliated with Fox.
Interesting.
Yeah, she was a Fox contributor for like a local station. I think it was WTXN, but I'm not sure.
Hmm.
And yeah, no, and the
That's
guy who
expensive.
was allegedly holding the door shut, I believe that was him. Well, whatever. Anyways, one of the guys that they interviewed, his name was Luis Barbano. The guy turns out to not only be an actor, he has an IMDb page, and he started a video called "The Spirit of Orlando" like last year. It was like a
But
music video.
there's a lot of these things, though. I mean, there's been. What concerns me is that we have an election year,
Yeah.
and we have a year where we have a significant British referendum. And it seems like the number of attacks has increased this year significantly more than it has been in any previous year.
Mm-hmm.
The one that I've looked at and thought was very, very odd was the Trump assassination one. The
Yes.
little autistic lad from England. It had it made the second I heard that story, it immediately made me think of Adrian Veidt in Watchmen, where he hires the guy to pretend to assassinate him, and then when he's got him pinned down on the floor, he sticks a cyanide pill in his mouth and kills him. Because then all of a sudden, everybody's looking at him and thinking he's a target.
So do you think Trump set it up?
I don't know if Trump set it up. I don't. I doubt it was Trump, to be honest with you. But it doesn't sit right. And I mean, you talk to this kid's parents, and they say he had no interest in American politics. Um, and the reality is, the Trump thing has made a lot. There's just too many disconnects with it. It doesn't strike me as real. Either the kid was completely off his head or what have you. I don't know, but it doesn't. Something about it doesn't add up for me. And I don't think it was Trump that orchestrated by any stretch of imagination. It may well have been somebody within um, his grouping and what have you, one of his advisors or something like that that had done it behind his back in order to maintain that sort of plausible deniability with Trump that he didn't know about it, but it just doesn't sit right with me. The interview with the kid's parents, it doesn't add up.
Yeah, honestly, it sounds an awful lot like the same situation with Joe Cox, the guy who allegedly killed her. Same
Hmm.
situation. The guy mentally ill, loner, no real friends, nothing, literally the exact same words, no interest in UK politics. You got to wonder though, like, who is it? If there's somebody behind this, who is it that's doing it? It's the same MO. And to be honest with you, it's the same exact recruiting situation that ISIS uses and the Taliban uses. Their MO is to find somebody who's been emotionally or mentally compromised and is in a state where they're vulnerable, and then ply them either with drugs or with blackmail, something or other. I mean, ISIS guys have been known to rape men and then videotape it and threaten to show their parents and their families. You know,
Okay.
But I'm not saying any of that shit happened to them. I'm just saying that, like, it just it does reek that this person was controlled, but by whom? You know.
Mm.
Um.
It may not. It may be something even simpler than that. I mean, the reality is the man was mentally ill.
Yeah.
Chances are he was on some form of medication.
Yeah.
If you've ever known somebody who's on any significant sort of brain altering medication, if you fuck around with that dosage,
Oh yeah, it'll fry him.
you can cause severe changes in that person because ultimately what you're doing is you're playing with the chemistry in the brain. Now, what's interesting with this one is that the fact that if you look at all the materials that they talked about in his home, they stopped in 1999. That's 20 years ago. Sorry, not 20 years
That's
ago,
very odd.
17 years ago. Um, you have the fact that his half brother, sorry, his brother was half caste. Now, if you are somebody who is England for the English and this, that, and the other, you're not going to have a strong relationship with a half caste person. You wouldn't be happy about them being your brother, but apparently they got on like a house on fire. He was saying that he was never an ardently political person, and the timing concerns me. Now, at the end of the day, do I think that somebody got directly involved and changed it? Sorry, and set it all up? I don't know, but again, it comes back. I think one of the things that you'll find with people that are willing to look at all sides of the story is that they will never come out and say, I am absolutely certain of this. And this is why I always have a problem with conspiracy theories because it is saying this is what happened.
I think you're right. You can't fully know until you were actually there. And I'm not so far gone with my theories as to not believe evidence when given it to me, but it better be damn good evidence. It better be very convincing evidence sometimes because some of the shit that's been going on, it's insane. And for example, the video of that Joe Cox, guy getting arrested. Not one of those police cars had a light on. They didn't form a perimeter. Only one guy drew a gun. None of the officers even tried to secure the guy. He's already in cuffs. What the fuck are they waiting for? It was a big show. And
Mm.
even the crime scene stuff doesn't make any fucking sense. Like, why were there two handbags there? Why are they holding a shoe? Why are they all dressed in like freaking? They look like Michelin men. You know,
Mm.
like it was pure kabuki.
Uh, you with these things, you question: are they fixing the event or are they fixing the crime scene?
I think,
You look at things like the San Bernardino the shooters, for example. Within hours of that taking place, the landlord was letting news crews into their apartment, and people were traipsing through what should have been an active crime scene.
yeah, that was interesting.
I mean, is there any way that you can phrase that as anything other than sabotaging an active crime scene?
No, there is none. In fact, every single one of them should have been charged.
It's absolutely insane.
That's a
And
federal
it
crime.
wasn't necessarily the police that were letting him in; it was the landlord that was letting him in. But the police should have stopped it. They should have cordoned it off. They should have had, guards there to make sure that nobody was coming in and tampering with it.
Yeah, there's
And
no
that
way.
is,
Yeah, there's no way that the police didn't know until after they showed up.
yeah. But
Oh,
in that situation, I would imagine it was advantageous to them. Who knows?
yeah.
With all these things, you are never really going to know. I mean, you talk about levels of security clearance and all these kind of things. There are secrets upon secrets upon secrets that, even top level government employees don't know.
Right. Like the 28 pages of the 9/11 report. They're currently trying to declassify them and make them known, but as much as the CIA wants to put it out there, according to them, it's being blocked by, well, you can guess whom.
I wonder why. Is it perhaps because it severely implicates the Saudis?
It couldn't be that the standing Secretary of State is accepting money from Saudi Arabia, or the fact that the standing president has direct, like, borderline familial ties with them or anything.
Well, I mean, they've come out recently and they've said that there's been leaked information and they've said that they have enough now to indict Hillary. They have an airtight case. Is enough
Yeah,
to
for
indict her,
sure.
and it's still nothing is being done.
It's being blocked by executive office.
Mm.
I mean, if that's not obvious enough, I mean, the only person who has the ability to tell the FBI or the CIA or any one of the alphabet boys to stand down would be either Department of Defense on the highest level, Homeland Security, or the executive office. And both those other ones would still have to go back to the executive office. It,
It's not possible, and it's the fact that nobody on that side, nobody is questioning it. Nobody is saying. I mean, even the fucking social justice warriors get that this is a bad thing, and yet all of Hillary's supporters say, nope, it's
I'm
fine.
with her.
Yeah, it's amazing, and as daft as it sounds, because let's be honest, Trump would wipe the fucking floor with Hillary.
Oh, God.
When it comes
I
to an
want to see
election,
that debate.
she is not going to win against him. So in a way, you kind of think, well, I hope she stays in because then we get the Trump presidency.
Well, even
But I
Bernie's.
would much rather see a Trump versus Sanders campaign. I think that would be a genuine, you know, let's roll the dice and see what America chooses kind of situation, rather than just a
Ugh,
walkover.
I don't know, man. Because, like I said, if either one of those two wins, the American way of life is over. Not just because, socialism and all this other stuff, but it's because the core foundation pillars of this nation are being questioned right now, whether it be the First Amendment or the Second Amendment, the Fourth Amendment, the Fifth Amendment. Basically the whole Bill of Rights right now is on the table in the chopping block,
Mm.
and you
And they
know,
never take them all at once; they take them little by little.
and this is the first time in history they have the chance to take them all in one fell swoop,
Mm.
beginning with gun control. And the terrifying part about this is that even Bernie Sanders has given up on lying. Yesterday, I saw him on TV. They were I forgot what show he was on. Was it Colbert? I can't fucking remember. But they asked him, "Hey, so what are your plans now? If Hillary gets the nomination and you have no path to victory." And he was basically like, "Oh, well, I guess our team would be looking for the best way to get her into office, basically." And it's like, whoa, hold on, time out, time out. You are supposed to be the anti-corporate, anti-establishment, anti corruption guy, and you are so
Mm.
cheap to basically just go, oh no, on national TV, bleh, I'm bullshit, and his fans all clap, and it's like, wow,
This was the big test with Bernie, though, wasn't it? I mean, it was, can he hold out? Can he keep going? Can he refuse to give up? And I think that there could have, if he holds out, there is the opportunity for him to push her out of the way.
in a
But
contested election, yes.
yeah, and the reality is, if it all starts to come out exactly, if people can find that paper trail that links what the executive office is doing to the fact that Clinton isn't being charged, then they can push Bernie in. It sounds stupid because as you just said, it could only be coming from that one place, but you need to find the piece of paper that says it does. If you
Well,
see what I'm saying,
I mean, people were
people
placated by a
need proof. They will, again. You come back to Yuri's words, but they will deny what is plainly put in front of them.
he did say this. Yuri Bezmenov was a gem and a gift to humankind, in that he left us that 5-step plan. What
It,
the,
it, once you've seen him speak, once you've watched that video,
it ruins everything.
you understand the world on so much greater a level because it's like being given the cipher.
Jesus Christ!
You start to see how many people are using this method to push certain things through, and there's no honesty
And they
anymore.
don't
Everything
know. They
is.
don't know what the fuck they're doing. Like that's the beauty. It's like MK Ultra, like it's fucking mind control. It's amazing. He gave these talks in the 70s and 80s and 60s, and he said in 20 years you will have an entire indoctrinated generation that will want and beg and scream and cry for socialism and communism.
Mm.
Exactly 20 years later. You
It's a
can't
lot of pressure.
make this shit up. And not one of them knows where it came from. Not one of them knows about the Marxist upbringing that they came up in. Not one of them understands that there is no difference between democratic socialism and fucking Stalin.
Oh, the fun one is when you point out to them that actually Hitler was a far leftist and that
Oh,
National
yeah.
Socialism is just another form of socialism. They really can't make that connection until you make it absolutely explicit. I mean, you look at what he was doing. He was creating a
Nothing.
staunch border. He was creating a massive sense of national pride. The state is everything, the fatherland, and all this sort of stuff. This is why they were never going to allow a situation where bombs were going to be dropped on the fatherland. You look at the situation with VW, with Fanta. He was trying to create a self-sufficient economy. And a lot of the things that go in with what they were doing were very much practiced within the communist regimes.
Oh,
Things
Volkswagen.
like thought crime, things like, I mean, the SS and the Gestapo are not really that far off from what the KGB were doing in Soviet Russia. It was a culture of, inform on your enemies.
Hitler Youth.
Um, it's a very dangerous slide. And is what they're doing with all these campaigns to get people fired? I mean, I am really fucking pissed off with Thunderfoot at the moment for completely selling out the British people and being a smug
Oh,
bastard about
oh,
it.
you unsubbed
Um,
immediately.
yeah, that latest video, oh God. But he got his job threatened because of opinions that he was expressing.
Oh, yeah, Laughing Witch.
Um, how is that any different to, inform on your neighbours for the fatherland? It is trying to remove undesirables. I mean, you go back to the fucking weathermen, who literally said, "What are you going to do?" Right, okay, we're going to change their minds. What if you can't change their minds? Well, then we'll have to kill them.
Pretty much. It will
And
snow today.
that's where all this stuff goes. Politically correctness, it is a Maoist concept.
Yeah, it's newspeak. It's the Orwellian newspeak, you know.
Mm.
And I think honestly, it's at least half of what is driving the political climate right now. I think people are sick and fucking tired of being told what to do, what to say, how to speak, how to dress, who to vote for, who not to vote for, what opinions to have, what people you should and shouldn't let into your borders, what kind of situation you should actually allow yourself to be in. It's. I think people are just getting sick and tired of it, and they just want their lives back.
I've seen this a lot with the Brexit thing. One of the most common things you're seeing on Twitter at the moment is people posting, basically, guess what? Calling an entire group of people racist doesn't work anymore. And it's not the fact that, we want to be racist. It's not the fact that people are supporting racism. It's the fact that they're throwing the fucking word around like it means nothing. And when a word like that word is supposed to have power. I mean, it is supposed to be something that is utterly unforgivable and so on and so forth. But when it is being used so interchangeably, it just becomes another swear word and it
Cheapens it.
loses any sense of meaning. And people are getting their lives ruined over minor fucking comments, jokes. Um, it, People are getting everything taken away from them for things that they're saying and thoughts that they're thinking, and that is not a good scenario to be coming towards. But these fucking idiots are inviting this in. They're helping it along. They're creating their own prison, and they don't even fucking see that they're doing it.
And the amazing part about it is that the people who are doing this, it's so counterproductive. It's insane. They are devaluing words that are meant to keep boundaries, and they are empowering words that are meant to be forgotten or turned into a joke. For example, calling somebody a racist, like you said, is supposed to be a shame tactic. Shaming is fine, provided that it's used to enforce the social what's the word I'm looking for? The social contract.
Yes, the societal norms and what have you.
Exactly. But when it becomes a thing where you just throw it around as a form of control, well, you're correct. It cheapens it. It loses its power. But the things that we should be, using up to the point of, hilarity, things that should be losing their power, things that should be turned into, I don't know, something as frivolous as possible. Like, for example, the gratuitous use of the N word nowadays, like nigga this, nigga that. It's become more of a hilarious kind of situation to put on TV. You know,
It's morphed as well. I mean, there are
yeah,
the two spellings, and there's the one spelling that you don't use, and there's the other spelling that you can
and
use.
it's become an all-encompassing term that doesn't even include just black people anymore. It includes like just thugs and stupid people in general to a lot of people. You know, it could be a Hispanic thug. You know, it could be in some cases I've even seen white guys that have been referred to as niggas by these people. You know, and
No, the same thing is true of the word faggot these days. I mean,
exactly,
the reality is that word gets thrown around constantly online. And you know what? It doesn't mean that
yeah, it
anymore.
doesn't
It
mean
is
gay people
these
anymore.
days interchangeable with the word bitch.
Right, and it's lost all real power. It's really just kind of like calling you a stupid head. You
Yeah,
know,
and when you're arguing people online that have fucking anime avatars, do I know what your sexuality is? Well, I do if you put it in your fucking profile and you say I am this and these are my pronouns and so
Zizer.
on and so forth. Let me draw massive amounts of attention to this. This is what people never understood. The anonymous culture, the whole fucking point of it is that you are only the sum of your words and your ideas.
Which is a
That's the
beautiful thing.
point.
Yeah,
We leave the whole fucking identity politics bullshit off the table and we just come together and speak as people. And I don't know who the fuck I'm talking to when I'm, speaking to somebody that hasn't got their MySpace photo, Facebook photo, whatever, show my age, um, up on their profile. If you are just a cartoon picture or whatever it may be, then that is all I know you of. And all I can take from you are the words that are coming out of your mouth and the ideas that you're bringing to the table. Anything else is bullshit.
it's one of the highest form of written communications. You know, it's only the thought that counts. And honestly, I think that if we ever lose that in this generation of instant information access, we will have lost our souls. And you know, it's this exact same level of transparency that has changed the world and that has made it possible for this whole globalist movement to come crashing to a halt. And it's because people like Clinton could get away with murder before the internet because they could just hide stuff away in dusty files and use gag orders imposed upon judges to make sure that no one ever heard of Juanita Broderick. You know,
Mm.
but now a simple Google search and you can find all 30 something of Clinton's accusers.
Even things that get deleted, you can go through archives, you've got the Wayback Machine. Nothing that you put out online is ever sacred. People will religiously archive tweets, Facebook pages, all these kind of things. And once you do it, it's out there. And I I mean I go back to the original fucking days of Java chat rooms, and just the most archaic VB bulletin board, forums and what have you. And back then, all you were was a screen name. You never put. People used to say, "Don't put your fucking picture online. It's a bad idea," because bad shit happens. I mean, you remember that girl that pissed off B, and they ended up getting her fired from her job and all sorts of other things.
Oh yeah, there was a few of
Um,
those.
yeah, you don't. She did it to get free pizza or something, and she ended up with her nude photos going out on the internet
Yeah, they
because
hacked her
they
computer.
were threatening her with all of her. They had her docs. It was fucking stupid. Um, but I go back to that era where you didn't put photos online. But a lot of these kids, they've grown up with Facebook, they've grown up with Instagram, and it is very much me, me, me. Let's put my entire fucking life out there for the
Don't
world
think
to
it
see.
through. Yeah.
And that's not a good thing. There are some quite ghoulish people out there, and you don't want to invite that. It's not a good idea. And, I mean, we come back to the idea about the identity politics being off the table and all these kind of things. But you don't put that stuff out there, and you have to deal with the consequences if you do. And they don't get this. They think that, the world should be a wonderful place. Well, it should be, but it isn't. Let's put aside these utopian fantasies of how the world should run and all that stuff and just be brutally honest and say the world is a good place, but it's got some fucking shitty bits.
Yeah, you know, I'm a firm believer that everybody should either be forced conscripted after high school or sent on a mission trip somewhere shitty. You know what I mean? Like either compulsory military service for a year or two, or send them on a missionary trip to some godforsaken hellhole. You know,
Mm.
and you don't need to go far. You know, I've traveled to Honduras, Dominican Republic. You know, these two places alone You know, if you step outside the resort in Dominican Republic, you have power lines being held up by just random scraps of wood just to keep the house from getting electrocuted.
It's not even that. I mean, I went out to Tunisia, and you have to. We were staying in a resort, and you have to be so careful there because they have these guys that pull up in horses and carriages,
Oh yeah, they'll just take you away.
and they will take you off to the middle of nowhere to their cousin's leather shop, and they will take you there. And right, you are buying something, or you're not getting a ride back, and there's no phone that you can use. You are stuck there, and I think people have this rosy idea of the world that there aren't bad people out there. There are a lot of fucking good people out there. Most people are good, but there are some bad ones.
And it only
And
takes a
that
small
kind
amount.
of
Yeah.
it screws with the narrative, this idea that there can be these bad people. It must always be this. This is why whenever you have shooters, they never look at why the shooter did what he did. They always go straight to he shouldn't have had a gun. And,
It's the wrong question.
I believe that if it's part of your constitution, it's like the old Pendulat quote about, national tragedies happen, and all that happens is the government ends up taking away rights from good people.
Right, and no one from Al Qaeda is ever going to look at a gun-free zone and go, "Oh, oh shit! Look, Mustafa, we can't blow ourselves up here."
No. And all you're actually doing is the reality is, again, everything with these things is based on utopian concepts. If there were no guns in America, then a gun ban would be great. But there are guns in America. There's a lot of guns being circulated on the black market, and the majority of gun deaths that aren't suicides, because let's be honest, that's the majority of actual gun deaths at the moment, if you believe the statistics. But the ones that are occurring in violent crimes, more often than not, are not bought through legal channels.
Right.
They're bought from dodgy back channels. They are generally not registered. They have had their serial numbers filed off. These are not guns that are part of the control system.
No.
So it's something that what you're doing is you're taking the gun away from the person that would use it legitimately, but you're not taking any guns away from those that wouldn't.
You're neutering
And
the
if
pig.
you could eradicate those guns that are out there that shouldn't be there, which is never going to fucking
Oh,
happen
of
because
course
the
not.
US border is too big to actually ever stop anything from truly getting in.
You might as well say,
Um,
collect the toasters.
you it's going to happen. People are going to get guns in. And all you're doing is you're taking them away from the people and taking away their opportunity to defend themselves in these situations. Do I believe that everybody should be entitled to a gun? No, I don't. It should be very strict regulations. But legitimate citizens that don't have mental health issues should be entitled to get them. And I have to come down with Crowder on this. I mean, he was on the Sky News in the UK, and he was explaining the situation. And when you look at how many people are on the no-fly list, and there's no reason given for it,
5-year-olds,
and they have no
active,
history of terrorism,
dead people.
and there is no justification required to put somebody on this list, that's a different scenario. Now, if somebody has a criminal record, yes, that person has been proven to have done something wrong. There's been due process. That person has been given an opportunity to defend themselves, and they've not been successful in defending themselves. You have a conviction there. You can say this person cannot have a gun. But as I say, the way politics works, you can put somebody's nose out of joint, and you can find yourself on that list.
Yeah, and again, this is all the same motivating factor for these decisions. I think when you have situations like, okay, for example, the terror watch list, and this is something where you're going to find in America a distinct split among the conservatives. Because there are some people, like, let's say Judge Jeanine Pirro, a woman who I highly respect and usually agree with, believes that, hey, if you're suspected of being a terrorist, you're on that thing, you have no rights. I'm much more of a centrist on this in the sense that, okay, you better have a very amazingly good reason to put somebody on a terror watch list. I don't even believe in terror watch lists, and here's why. If you believe that somebody is that much of a national crisis kind of situation where you need to watch these people, putting them on a list will do nothing for you. What you need to do is you need to assign an investigator to that person. That's the way we
Yeah.
used to do things. The terror watch list, all it does is give the government another tool to decide who gets to keep their rights. Because as it stands right now, if I were to join a militia, I would be on a terror watch list and a no-fly list within days. And the militia is in the Constitution right next to the right to bear arms.
The difficulty that you have is that these days you can be put on one of those lists for the websites that you visit, for the books that you purchase.
Mm-hmm.
There are there is no oversight, no accountability to what triggers putting you on one of these lists.
And there's no way
And
off
that's
either.
no, because to be honest with you, until you come into one of these situations, you will never know that you were on that list. You could go through your life for 4 or 5 years and not realize that you were on the list. Um, it's something that is going on in the background of people's lives being tampered with in a way that doesn't. It just makes me uncomfortable.
And it should. It's a vast intrusion of the government into your life. I mean, it's like the "Give me liberty, give me death" speech. Where he says like, How long are you gonna wait? Before you take action? Are you gonna wait for the British government to put a soldier in every house? It's the same situation. Are we gonna wait until the globalist agenda has achieved a situation where even individual governments have no problem intruding into not only their own people's lives, but into people's lives in other countries?
Mm.
You know,
But you have a point of no return at which you have to stand up and say no. And for me, again, I'm sort of bringing it back to that was the point of the Brexit. This was our last chance to do this. It would have
yes,
taken decades to get another referendum together. And in that time, you can pretty much guarantee with the way that Europe is going, they are moving to a closer and closer integration. They would have taken away our currency, and then once you're stuck in the euro, it becomes even more complicated to pull out because you have to change your currency over again. If we flipped over from the pound to the euro, that's going to cause instability in and of itself. And Christ, the whole European bloc is precariously balanced at the moment. And with the way they're going, if they're pushing towards more integration, the way you create more integration, you stop people from leaving. And the way they would have done that, they would have removed Article 50 from the Lisbon Treaty,
dear
and then we
God,
would have been stuck. And the only way out there is violence, and
yeah.
that's not what I wanted it to ever come to. This was our way to get out while it was still legal through diplomatic process. And it was I looked at the situation, and I have done quite a bit of research into the history of the EU and how it was founded and how it's evolved over the years, and I've watched it, and I saw this as the this is your last exit point, and that's why I pushed so hard for it. And I mean, Christ, I fucking joined Twitter 3 4 months ago just to push this thing.
Same here, actually.
Um,
Yeah,
and it was too big. I couldn't I wouldn't have been able to live with myself if I hadn't given everything to achieve this. And I was amazed when it happened. Up until the moment that Sunderland announced, I didn't think we were going to win. And I got this sense of hope, and I came to the realization that fucking hell, this is going to happen. We are going to jump off the train before it hits the brick wall. And I have never felt better than I did the next morning. And I didn't sleep that night. I went all the way up with the the count as it went
me
along.
too,
And
actually.
I went to work the next day, and I hadn't actually been to sleep. But the world just felt instantly different overnight. Something had changed. There
Better,
was, yeah,
freer.
pretty. And none of this stuff's even been enacted yet. I mean, Christ, we are still a member of Europe right now. We are still a member of the EU, and will be for another 2 years. But it's been set in motion.
You know,
Um,
it's funny.
Now we just need to trigger Article 50 to make it no going back.
Yeah,
Um, but
burn the bridge,
you have to. It's like when you split up with someone. I mean, don't keep going back
block the
because
number.
yeah, it's it's never going to lead to good things. It's just going to be sadness and pain. So we need to be getting on with what we're doing. We need to be stabilizing. We need to be building our economy back up. We need everybody to stop running around screaming, thinking that they suddenly understand economics when the reality is they are just reading things and taking things completely out of context. No real understanding of what's going on. I mean, Christ, the footsie ended the week on a high.
Yeah.
What does that tell you? The the economy is bouncing back, and people talk about the pound value. Yeah, that's fucking terrible. But guess what? Now we're competitive on the world global stage in terms of manufacturing because our costs are lower to other countries. Our exports can increase. We can sell more to a wider world. We have Canada lining up. We have America lining up saying, "Oh no, you're not going to be the back of the queue anymore." Well, that's fucking convenient, isn't it, Obama?
Yeah, listen, don't get me started on Obama. All right, that simpering fucking idiot. I swear, like, where does he even get off going to the UK to tell you guys how to vote?
But this is my point. This is the whole leftist liberal mentality now of I know better. I know what's best for you. Not, let me work with you and talk about, what you want to get out of things. I know what's best for you and you will do it. You see this through the whole feminist movement. I mean, Christ, you go on any of their major YouTube personalities, and it's all instructions on how to argue. It's when
Oh
they
yeah,
say this, you say
talking
this,
points.
and it's almost like somebody working in telesales reading from a fucking script. When you get this prompt, you say this. This is the answer.
Th-
Not
this
let's
isn't.
talk about this. Let's think. Let's discuss. Let's
Yeah.
throw around some ideas. No, this is the answer.
See, cause it's mostly because this isn't marketing. This is psychological warfare. These are psyops, is what this is.
Mm,
So this is why you have situations like, let's say, the slut walk, right? Where it
mm,
just takes one straw man situation that may or not have even happened, and you can mobilize an entire army of just brain dead zombies. This was the whole Remain campaign.
mm.
This was the whole Remain campaign was basically, oh, look, an MP is dead and she happened to be Remain. So let's make up a bunch of bullshit, say Britain first did it. And then the damage is already done when we find out it's not true. But until then, just use these talking points.
Hmm.
And you don't need to argue because if you are ever stumped, you can block somebody or you can report them for harassment.
Yeah, but that's they're almost like badges of honor at this point. Getting somebody to block you. It's
Yeah, it's
I
actually
won the
kind of rewarding.
argument.
Yeah.
Congratulations, you. I have never blocked anybody. I will never block anybody. I've never muted anybody, and I will never mute anybody because at the end of the day, you take, say, for example, Ben Shapiro. Ben Shapiro
Right.
completely sold out every moral and every principle
Oh,
he ever had.
Michelle Fields.
It's not even just the Michelle Fields thing. He attacks people for playing the race card, but he will happily play the anti-Semitism card. And the reality is, most of these people that are targeting with him with this don't hate Jewish people, but they do love to see Ben Shapiro spaz out, and it's the easiest way to make him spaz out. Fucking Milo nailed it. They are not racist. They are not, people that hold these as firm, steadfast beliefs. It's all a fucking gag
Yeah.
in most cases. Don't get me wrong, there are some people that are fucked in the head, but those people are going to be those people. There's no real anger there. There's no real spite. It's just poking the bear, and he just comes out at it after it every time. But getting back to the point, yeah, he's done all this egregious shit, and he's acted like a fucking crybaby. But every now and again, he will come out with something that is useful, that is
Brilliant sometimes,
worthwhile.
yeah.
So even though I don't agree with him on a lot of his politics, and I think he's a fucking baby throwing his toys out the pram, I will not block that person because I can learn something from them every now and again. I can learn something from fucking leftists. It comes back to the thing about reading multiple news sources, reading the left, reading the right, because they will all have something useful to say at some point. They will all have their spin on it, and only by taking all those views and putting them together do you actually get the genuine article. You get the real sense of what's going on.
Yeah, and sometimes you do need those extreme views in order to put things into context. I mean, even what's that saying? Even a clock is right, or a broken clock is right twice a day. For example, I think it was Eggsy sent me this Jacqueline Glenn video, and I immediately was not going to watch it because I was like, "Fuck Jacqueline Glenn," you know.
Mm.
Every time she starts going on a tirade about something, it's usually so incredibly retarded that it makes my brain hurt. I can feel my toenails leaving my body, you know. But he's like, just watch it. It was a thing on white guilt, and believe it or not only was it palatable, she made a number of good points. And I'm like, why aren't you like this always? You know. So I think sometimes these, you know, people that can be so unpalatable and so wrong 90% of the time can sometimes strike upon a chord, you know?
Mm. And the world would be fucking. What they want to create is this homogenized world where everybody all has the same opinions on everything. And can you
Mm-hmm.
imagine how fucking boring that world would be? I mean, everybody
Ugh,
would just be sat around going, "Yes, we agree," and that's every conversation at that point. It's the eradication of independent thought, trying to almost create a hive mind where you do not step away from what the group does, otherwise you will be ostracized. You see this throughout the years in cults. Scientology is the classic example. I mean, the concept of disconnection is so prevalent within the sort of social justice warrior community. This idea that you said the wrong thing, therefore you are now on the outside. And we've seen it happen so many times with the left where they just cannibalize themselves. Look at fucking Bill Maher. Bill Maher is about as
ugh,
left as you can
I
get.
can't
And
stand
you've
that
got
man.
Ben Affleck screaming at him that he's a
Oh god,
racist, he's this, that, and the other.
it's disgusting.
Bill
It's
Maher,
gross.
yeah, he is about as left as you can get.
And he still looked at Ben Affleck like he was fucking insane. I know.
Dawkins, Dawkins got ripped to shreds. And don't get me wrong, he can be incredibly smug sometimes, and the way he delivers things is not the best. But the man has good ideas, and he got completely ostracized.
Well, that's the
That
disease
fucking
on the left, though. That smugness. You know,
he
it's
needs to he needs to work on it. He needs to become more palatable, and he needs to be coming to people with more of a conversation. I mean, this is where Sam Harris will always
yeah,
trump all these other people because he will come and he will have a conversation with you in a civil manner. He's not talking to you like you're a fucking idiot. He's looking for your perspective, and yeah, he will poke holes in it, but he'll do it in a constructive way to try and change your mind
right.
rather than telling you you are wrong and you should think this.
Yeah,
Because when you get into doing that, you are no better than the people that you're fighting against.
which is it's funny. I have to stand by Ken Hovind when I say that atheism is basically a religion of itself nowadays. The most militant evangelists you will ever meet are atheists. And personally, I mean, when I'm conversing with an atheist, I'm talking to somebody as an equal. The vast majority of the times, they're talking to me as if I'm some sort of moron. And it's
Hmm.
funny because it takes a massive amount of arrogance to say that there is no God in the first place, knowing full well that you know almost nothing about the universe. So
Hmm.
starting off on an absolute that can't be changed is no different from me saying there is a God.
Yeah. And I think the problem is that a lot of people that if they were being brutally honest with it would say that they are not an atheist, they're an agnostic.
Right, because I have no fucking idea what they're talking about at that point. None of us do.
I you've got different perspectives. You've got people who have come to this conclusion and nothing will ever sway them. Whenever I'm talking to somebody that's religious, I say, fucking come at me with every justification that you have. And if you have a convincing enough argument, I will get down on my knees tomorrow and pray because I am confident in my opinions. And if you're confident in your opinions, then you're willing to hear what the other side has to say. You're willing to take their arguments on board and factor them into your own thinking. If you are not confident, you're going to sit there throwing a fucking tantrum and throwing out insults. And we see
Yeah,
this all the time. Everything just denigrates into you're an idiot, you're stupid, this, that,
educate
and the
yourself, you
other.
fool.
Exactly.
But we definitely got to
And
have that
the reality
conversation.
is you've read different books to the books that they've read. I
Right.
mean, your average militant atheist. Don't get me wrong. I'm firm in my belief that I do not think that there is a God. And I'm also, for me, it's not so much about thinking that there isn't a God, so much as I don't agree with any of the religions.
I am more of an anti-theist than I am an atheist, if that makes sense.
Oh no, that makes perfect sense.
Um, I accept maybe there is a God. Who knows? Who knows? You are never going to know this fact. But I disagree with all of the major religious texts and the way they try to pin everything down. And I think, if people want to be religious, that's cool. Do what you want. It's when those religious freedoms start impeding upon me.
Yeah,
The reality is, and I mean, one of the reasons that I am personally anti the burqa. Personally, this is not me saying that there should be any kind of legislation or this, that, and the other. I'm personally anti it. I don't like the idea of it because you look around and there are CCTV cameras everywhere now.
right.
Now, why is it that 90% of 99.9% of the citizenship has to be on CCTV all day, having their movements monitored, etc., etc., and you have this one group that says no, 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 we're not having this. From that perspective, from the security perspective, it concerns me. And if you read the Quran, the burqa is never mentioned anywhere.
No, not once.
It was said by Muhammad that these women should dress modestly. There is nothing modest about putting a full body covering in black over you. You are drawing more attention. That is not modest. A modest person wants to, cover themselves up. I have spoken with a guy that I used to work with, and he said that a woman was being very bad because she was wearing leggings. Now, her entire lower half is covered by these leggings, but because they're not loose, this is her not being modest.
I mean, it depends on the leggings. I've seen some that are so painted on where you get full camel toe.
No, this was not that kind of scenario. They were practically jogging
Oh,
bottoms,
like
but
yoga pants.
not, yeah, like sweatpants almost.
Okay, yeah, no, in that case, I
Um,
get it. Yeah.
but because they weren't incredibly baggy, because you could sort of see the outline of her arse or whatever, yeah, this was wrong. And I'm not joking. This guy said to me that women should dress modestly because men should not be held responsible for their urges. And when
See, that's ridiculous.
you view it in that context, you hear all this sort of feminist talk about victim blaming and all this sort of stuff. How is that not fucking victim blaming? That is basically saying to the woman, you dress in a certain way, therefore. Now, again, it is the literal feminist argument. They are deeply against this, but for some reason they keep sort of denying the realities of what's contained within this book and what the religion actually entails and what's involved with it. But when you look at this, this is basically saying that the woman is responsible for the man raping her because of what she was wearing. Now, how many times have we heard feminists rail against any concept of, oh, well, you were dressed like a slut, therefore you were asking for it? Is that not what this is saying, but a far more extreme version of it?
Well, as long as they're Muslim.
It's a different scenario.
Well, no, I mean the whole cologne
You
rape
never
situation.
underestimate the effect of the progressive stack. I thought that was absolutely hilarious with Germany when they first had the migrants coming in,
Just
and they
dress
had these women
better.
setting up dating agents where agencies where you could date a migrant, and that all
Oh,
went away after Cologne.
yeah, I'm sure. I mean, Sweden became the rape capital of the world. Germany became the censorship capital of the world, and they all plugged their ears. Went, no, 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 no. We can't feel you raping us.
Mm. And the media goes along with it, but this is the beauty of the information age, and just as it screwed over politicians because they can't hide anything more anymore, this is what is killing the mainstream media. It used to be that the major newspapers, the TV networks, these were your source of information. Unless you wanted to go and sit in a library and browse through endless old dusty books, the way you got your information was from these two sources, the newspapers and the television. Now I can go out there and I can find any number of sources. I can find transcripts of conversations. I can find logs of chats that went on. I can find all this stuff myself. So the people that were previously the gatekeepers of the information are no longer the gatekeepers.
It's on us
And
now.
this is why they're
Yeah.
failing because they're not adapting. What the mainstream media should be doing now more is kind of opening the floor up to almost the public to discuss these things,
The
to
people.
almost incorporate themselves into the media. And you see this because those that are doing well on social media are doing well as sites overall. Breitbart is very, very good at placing itself into situations,
Drudge
and
Report.
that's where it
Yeah.
gets its clicks from. Drudge Report's exactly the same. Ralph is a classic example of somebody who inserts himself into the situation,
Really.
and sort of
Yeah.
runs with it. And fair play. Ralph's great. We love Ralph.
Absolutely.
He's the man on the ground and whatever. And this is where the evolution needs to occur. Everything needs to be instant now because I'm so used to going on the BBC website and seeing like breaking story. It's like I knew about that an hour ago.
Or better yet, it's not really news. For example, excuse me, after the Orlando fiasco, all sorts of retarded shit was happening in the Senate floor. it was oh god, it was a
Oh no,
shit
I
show.
saw it. The sit-in.
Oh, they started singing "We Shall Overcome," and my favorite
Mm,
response was I think it was like Miss New Jersey, or not the actual Miss New Jersey, but some one of my following people on Twitter. She goes, "Overcome what? The Constitution?" And I'm like, "Yes,
yeah.
correct. They're trying to overcome the Constitution right now." And nobody was reporting on it, but Kim Kardashian was number one in moments, basically excoriating the Senate for quote failing America, and that it's so sad and horrible that we can still get guns. And she named not less than three different, four different, five different lies and misinformation tactics right in her thing. Like, oh, it's so sad that people on terror watch list can buy guns. No, the fuck they can't. They took them off four times.
Mm.
All right, and then it's like, oh, it's just too easy to get a gun in America. I'm like, oh shit. Do you know how much money I had to spend for my permit? And then
And when you've got that much involvement with the FBI, with them having him on, taking him off, having him on, taking him off, you start to question: did they enable him to get a gun because they saw this young man that was very, very troubled, that was very, very heavily into the religion? And I mean,
he went to Saudi
when you
Arabia.
you hear some of the opinions his dad expressed in terms of being supporters of the Taliban and all this kind of stuff, it was heavily indoctrinated into him. And there's no question of that.
Oh, he traveled
And then you just
overseas.
let him get a gun at just the right moment, just the right moment when you think he's about to blow, and then that happens.
Well, and the amazing part about it is that he didn't need to go out and buy guns either. He worked for G4S as an armed security guard, so he had the rarest of all carry permits. He had a New York City carry permit, man.
Jesus.
I was it New York City? It was either New York or Washington. But either way, you don't get this shit. Like you don't get the
Mm.
permits he had. He worked for G4S on a Department of Homeland Security contract.
But the weird thing was, I mean, his co-workers, one of them was a cop, and he tried to report him, and it just got ignored
Well, they eventually
because
called
they,
it racist.
yeah,
They eventually called it racist, and they said that his coworkers were racist. Therefore, we are closing the investigation.
and it's led to this. And I guarantee you there'll be no accountability for the person that closed that investigation.
Absolutely not. And I guarantee we'll never hear their name. If we do, there will be a patsy. Because I'm telling you, stuff like this doesn't happen on the lower levels. Somebody had to make that
Mm.
call. But here's the best part about it. With all of these contacts with the government, and the fact that this guy was allowed to run wild, and the fact that everyone knew it was just a matter of time, the fact that they knew he had links to, um, they knew he traveled overseas, you know.
Mm.
I mean, he had every single mark of a sleeper agent, if not worse. He made the guys that did 9/11 look like well, they were selling Girl Scout cookies or something. It's just
Mm.
this guy was just.
But we come back again to this old thing of did they set it up or did they just allow it to
I
happen?
think honestly, I think it's a little bit of both. If they're up, like I said, I don't think it's outside the realm of possibility that this guy did it for his own ideologies, but I definitely think that there's a possibility he was used as an attack dog, by whom I don't know. Maybe we will never know, but I do know this. It is very interesting that it is happening in an election year on a hot topic item, and it happened to attack the group of people most likely to affect the election.
And that's where it all starts to come into to And it's things that went on around it. I mean, you had Milo pushing the gays for Trump
Love it.
hashtag and what have you, and that got censored by YouTube. It wouldn't autofill. Now, I can understand. I mean, I had the situation with mine where I kind of I picked a particularly provocative one and pushed it out there, and all of a sudden everybody was kind of censoring it on Twitter and what have you, and it wouldn't autofill, and it wouldn't trend, and trends were being manipulated, and I can tell you this because I saw one of the other ones go from 350,000 to 650,000 tweets in the space of about a second,
Right.
and then eventually go back down to 350,000. And it's like, where did all this come from? Oh, I see. Okay. And I saw the manipulation of it because you could see that the actual Twitter feed on the timeline of what was trending was not concurrent with what was going on other websites that were tracking the direct number of users as opposed to tinkering with the algorithm and getting things going that way. But we still managed to get it done.
Yeah.
But what is offensive about the words gays for Trump? It
Nothing.
is, it is, it is, Trump is the curse word in that.
Correct. Yeah. No. And what they won't say is that they'll say that it's the word gay, right? But if you use it in every other context with any other word, they'll be fine. Like gay pride,
Most of the
gay
people
parade.
that were posting it were gay, though. That's the
I know.
thing,
I That's what I'm saying. Like this is the sickness here. This is the same thing that drives these morons where it's like, "Oh, I will be offended for you." And if you are not offended or outraged as a minority, you are no longer a minority, you're a sellout.
Well, the classic example of this is the term African American, as if the only place that black people ever come from is Africa.
Right.
There are Jamaicans, there's the West Indies. There are all these places around the world where beyond Africa where people exist. I mean, you could almost class sort of Aborigines in Australia as being sort of black. But it's this thing of we must pin you down to this one group and we must use this one acceptable term.
You must be identified somehow.
They always talk about how they're creating more language because they're creating more words, but they are creating those words to get rid of existing words.
Right.
And you are also seeing things like the fucking 1 in 4 or 1 in 3 or 1 in 5,
Oh
depending on how
God.
serious the conversation
Let's
is.
not get into that.
Rape statistic. And
Jesus.
you take into account the fact that to get to that figure, they padded the number so much with like, oh well, the girl was drunk. Well, I'm not being funny. Go out in Leamington, sorry, go out in the UK and see what people are doing. Everybody's fucking drunk, and that's how people end up getting together. Um, as harsh as it may sound, how many births over the years have been as a result of a drunken night out, and you end up
Yeah.
pulling somebody going back with them, and then something comes out of it.
Yeah.
And it's just this automatic assumption of we must remove all nuance from every situation, and we must make remake the meaning of words.
Well, you must remove all responsibility. I mean, if it's a woman, you must remove all responsibility. Because again, if a woman goes out and gets drunk and has sex with a person, a man, let's say, then that man is immediately guilty of rape. If the other situation occurs the other way around, a woman cannot rape a man. But if a woman goes out, gets drunk, and runs over 15 different people, I mean, would we give her a pass for that because she's drunk?
The Well, that's the other problem that you have is that this is not 90% of women. This is an angry, shouty group that's
Tiny minority.
maybe 5% of them, and they believe that all women should conform to their standards.
And you never know which one
Um,
it is either.
and yeah, it's a different standard for different things. And you come back to the question of where are all the women campaigning for equality in sewer work? Where are all the women
Nowhere.
campaigning for equality in garbage disposal? They're not concerned about that bit. It's not,
No, it's all about killing your
it's
babies
boring.
and putting men in jail.
It's a boring argument.
Don't want
It's
to have it. I know. Me either. Believe me.
well, you get to the point where you just let them be fucking mental in the corner with a megaphone and lead them to it. They'll get tired out eventually and come back to the group.
Yeah.
And I think we're getting to the point where nobody's listening to him anymore. I mean, Anita, who was one of the
Oh,
driving forces of third wave feminism, has sort of disappeared.
I was gonna say, don't even
Um,
mention the name. Let
well,
her
I don't
die.
think her historical videos managed to trigger as much controversy as her gaming videos because she can't really bait like 80-year-old men into claiming that they were sending her death threats because people don't tend to believe it as much.
So
So
ridiculous.
she's kind of petered out. Um, a lot of the major proponents of what was going on are drifting, and uh, I'm hoping that that's what Brexit is. To me, it's the domino effect. You get Brexit, you get Trump, and then we start to
CNN to
move
SJWs.
into a world where, maybe we have separate countries and, we move away from this idea of everybody coming together because the reality is you can build friendships rather than shackles.
Yes.
The example that I've been using to explain the EU to other people is if you think about a wild dog, a pack of wild dogs, if you will, if you put muzzles on them, they can't bite each other, but it doesn't stop them wanting to bite each other. And if that muzzle ever comes off for any reason,
Holy crap.
God help you. Now, if you train that dog, if you spend time with each of them, training the behavior out of them, making them more, housebroken and more like a pet rather than like an attack dog or what have you, then you will change the dog and you will make it not want to bite. But that's what the EU is. It's a muzzle. It's
Yep.
it's designed to stop countries going to war because they're stuck inside this block.
But yeah, by
And it's
definition, it's an
not
impasse.
dealing with the problems that create human conflict. It's just it's a rule. And that's the same thing that feminists are doing. That's the same thing that the progressive left is doing. That's the same thing that Black Lives Matter are doing to a certain extent. They're not looking at the problem and trying to work out how to solve it. They want to put in legislation. They want to say, this is a rule now. We're not going to have a conversation about this. We're not going to deal with the heart of the problem. We're not going to open up to any other kind of idea. This is how this is going to be done. And that's dangerous. When those ideas start to become the norm, and they really are starting to become the norm, largely down to the situation where the colleges and universities are being taken over by these fucking Marxists. Um,
Babe, do you believe Black Lives Matter?
I I believe I
I
believe that
believe
Black Lives
too.
Matter. I believe that all lives matter. Um,
But do you believe
I
black?
I don't believe a word that comes out of D-Ray's mouth. He's full of shit.
Ugh.
He is positioning himself as the next Al Sharpton. He turns up when the gunfire has occurred, and then he disappears as soon as the rioting starts.
But is nowhere to be seen in that little kids
He
kill in
likes
Chicago.
to stir the pot, and he is out for personal campaigning. I guarantee you, he's going to move into politics. He's already made noises about it, and this is just building himself up. And it has nothing to do with helping people. It has nothing to do with the problems. Um, in my opinion, as always with these things, I never like to come from a position of saying absolutely this is what the situation is, this is how I read it. He does not strike me as somebody who's genuine. He strikes me as somebody who is basically playing the Anita game, but on a much larger scale. And rather than going after Patreon money, he's going after power.
Much more
And
useful.
that's what he's got because I mean we've got a situation where Jack has come out and said that everything that's new with Facebook with Twitter gets run through D-Ray.
Oh God.
He has come out and he has said this. Whenever there is something new, I always go over to my man D-Ray and get him to have a look at it for me. So D-Ray is controlling the content. He's controlling, well, he's not controlling the content so much as the delivery of the content, the tweaks that are being made, what isn't permissible. It's
Hold on.
why are you
Hold
not
on.
running your own company, Jack? Why
Hold
are you
on.
letting this other guy
Have
make
you?
all these decisions for you on what you should and shouldn't be doing? Why have you not got the courage of your own convictions? He does not speak for the majority of the youth. He speaks for an angry 10%. Now, if you've got failing finances, customers leaving in droves like Twitter has, why are you focusing on a scenario that only appeals to a very small percentage of
Over
people?
stuff that never happened. Again, these are all straw men. And the best part about this is, have you noticed the name? It's the Twitter, what was it, Truth and Safety Council?
Trust and Safety Council,
Trust. Does
yes.
that not sound exactly like the Truth and Reconciliation Committee?
It sounds very much like the Ministry of Truth, if I'm being brutally honest. It is This is our way, and this is the way you're
The
allowed to think about
Inquisition.
things. And I mean, Christ, it's such a fundamentally flawed system. I mean, you look at Mark Kern getting banned for talking about surveillance and all this sort of stuff, and he said nothing wrong.
Yeah.
Um, but yet the other day there was a hashtag trending on Arab Twitter um, that basically read as "Death to all atheists,"
Great.
and Jack did
Yeah,
nothing.
it was in
It wasn't
Arabic. I remember
stopped from
this.
trending. It wasn't in any way prevented from going ahead. There was no moderation with it. There was no post being deleted that I could see anyway. It was just allowed to go because there is a significant um, the portion of the shares that are owned by by members of the Saudi royal family, and these things were allowed to happen because Jack is in bed with the wrong people. And I sometimes wonder if maybe he's just of the opinion that I'm in this deep, I can't get back out again. So just fuck it, let's run with it.
I mean, you had people in ISIS retweeting this. You had people like Islamic extremists actually retweeting
Yeah.
this. And it's amazing because if anything got censored, it was probably the other hashtag. What was it, like free the boobs or something?
Oh, it was tits out for Islam.
Yeah, there we
Yeah.
go. Tits out for Islam.
That was a lot of fun. Ironically, though, I have to say, in the moment to moment, Twitter is a lot more free than Facebook is now. Facebook has
Oh
been
yes.
completely colonized by liberal ideas, and you will get shouted down if you have any kind of conservative viewpoint at all. At least with Twitter, you you can say the thing. There is a recent possibility that your post will be deleted later, or this, that, and the
But
other.
in the second,
But you don't. I don't know. You tend to get um, you will get people standing up for you that share your viewpoints on Twitter. On Facebook, people are almost scared to do that because I think Facebook is tied to a
your
lot of personal
personal stuff.
pictures
Yeah.
and
Your
people
memories
use it
and
for work and stuff like that. Whereas Twitter, you're just completely anonymous, and that's what appeals to me about it.
yeah. So to tie everything back together, the social justice, politics, and all this. So what do you think the impact of Brexit is going to be on the United States, and what do you think the future of the UK is going to look like for the next year or two?
I think it's gonna reset politics to a certain extent. I mean, something like this has never happened before. Well, yeah, it has happened. I mean, it happened with yourselves back when you had the Civil War and what have you. But this sort of re-establishing of things and saying, we're not going to put up with this anymore is going to have ripple effects. I mean, we've seen it in the other countries that are looking to pull out. We've seen it in the fact that, Canada have come calling, Germany have come calling, America have come calling, saying they want to deal with us. But we took the impossible leap and it worked to a certain extent. Now, don't get me wrong. For the next 2 years, it's going to be a bumpy ride. Make no mistake about that.
Yeah.
This is undiscovered country, and the markets don't like uncertainty, and there are going to be ups and there are going to be downs. But one of the biggest things is how it gets covered in the media, because if people come out as the BBC did with the last recession and just preach doom and gloom, everybody stops spending, the
Yeah.
economy slows down, and the recession becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
It's
If
funny.
people say, let's get on with this, let's proceed as normal, let's go about our day, let's carry on shopping, let's carry on creating industry, let's keep the money flowing around, then it will be a much less bumpy ride. But you have to convince people of that.
See, I think there is a possibility that this will either take a couple of years to take off or it might take a couple of days. And here's why. If I was a rich person and had money to invest like this, the first thing I would have done right after Brexit, like the following day when the market crashed for a second, I would have bought every single British company I could find. I would have bought every stock I could,
Mm,
in profitable British companies. And here's why. Yes, it's gonna drop a bunch of points this year, you know,
hmm
but eventually the wheel and the cogs will meet,
mm,
and eventually, it's gonna take up again once people get their head out of their ass, you know, and decide that hey, we actually want to enjoy our country that we now have.
hmm
I think there's a lot of money to be had within this year. I think if a lot of people would stop to look at what the future is going to look like, they can turn amazing profits very quickly in the UK.
It's not only that, the reality is whatever happens with our economy is going to have ripple effects for
Oh
the
yeah,
European
undoubtedly.
economies. And they are in a very precarious position at the moment. So they are going to be doing it's difficult because you've got some of them out for blood and they are just purely out for revenge. It's nothing
Germany.
to do with policy and all this sort of stuff. They don't see the big picture. Merkel, in some senses, is a complete fucking idiot. I mean, she has caused this whole migrant crisis.
Some.
She has denigrated her people. But at the same time, she has been coming forward and saying there will be no tit for tat. We will make this as smooth as possible.
Oh really?
And she's
Okay.
putting her foot down on that. She is saying there will be no restrictive sanctions or this, that, and the other. And the reason she's saying this is because the BDI have come out and said, let's be honest, we are reliant on the English economy. 30% of their cars are coming to us. In the middle of a recession with a million refugees in her country, when resources are stretched paper thin, is she going to turn round to the major companies and say, "Oh, you're going to be closing factories, and you're going to be closing factories, and you're going to be closing
She'll be
factories"?
hung in the village square.
Yeah, it's not going to happen. So she's going to ensure that we get a reasonable exit. Now, there will be certain things that will be done because they want to discourage it, but I could see this almost going. I mean, they've already said there's going to be sort of greater integration between France and Germany. Um, who knows? Maybe they'll work it on a two-tier system,
Maybe. I mean,
whereby
yeah.
you go back to having the original six countries that formed the EU, and then all the other members have like having pool member benefits at the health club and what have you. You have access to certain things, but you do not have access to the whole thing. And I could see consolidation going on, who knows? But it's whether they can convince those people to stay in. And there was initially a feeling that European politicians would put sanctions on us and they'd hurt us to make it look like leaving the European Union was going to be the end of the world. But we already have America lining up for trade deals. We already have Canada. And we have Merkel on our side. Um, so I think we're going to be all right.
I
And
think so
I
too.
think that sets a very dangerous precedent for the EU because if we go off and we suddenly start experiencing the kind of growth that we've not had in recent years, I mean, we've had good growth, but it could always be better. And if that happens, other European nations are going to look at it and go, we want some of that. And this is where these Brexit votes are coming from. These Grexit and Swexit and all these various different things. They're looking at it and going, they did it. They got away, and people that are in Europe don't want to be in Europe because this is the other issue, and one of the reasons that our youth were so pro Europe because they're not in Europe. In that sense, we don't
Yeah.
have the level of integration that other countries have. We're not part of the euro. We are not physically on the continent, so we do not see a lot of what goes on with it.
Well, and if they are, it's only
Um,
for a couple of weeks.
you have this great body of water in between us and the rest of the continent in reality. I mean,
Yeah.
Cypriots have more in common with the British because they're cut off from the whole the landmass of Europe, if you will. What makes the Schengen so dangerous is because people can literally walk from one country to another. They can walk across the border, and there's very few checks in place. Once you're inside, because that's the whole point, there's an external border. Once you're inside, they don't really need to check your papers because you wouldn't be inside the external border otherwise.
Oh, that's a terrifying concept.
Mm. I mean, even in America, you have state lines and what have you, don't you?
We do,
You
but
have
there's no checks.
divisions, and I mean, if you're a criminal, this, that, and the other, you're not allowed to travel across state lines.
Well, in theory, no. I mean, in practice, you can. The only real,
You can get away with it, but
yeah.
you get in a lot of trouble if you get caught.
Well, yeah, that's true. Yeah, there are punishments for it. The only real reasonable way they can think of preventing this would maybe be an ankle bracelet or something. But
Mm.
but yeah, no. The reason we have states is for a completely different reason. It's not necessarily for security. It's more for checks and balances against the government.
Mm.
So it's a completely different animal than the EU. The EU is all about, well, if you want to be honest, subjugation of large groups of people. But
Making the poor ones reliant, and when you look at the way Europe treats the poorer countries, countries like Poland, like Romania, uh, like look at the way they're treating Greece and what have you. It is very similar, as Larry Elder put it, to the way that the Democrats treat the black community.
oh,
They are
absolutely,
like pets. They are kept on welfare
a
in
voting
order to keep
tank.
them compliant and voting. And there've been so many studies on this. I mean, the Democrats are always, in any country that you go to, Democrats are always going to be in favor of immigration because they know that immigrants vote for Democratic parties.
Well, Lyndon B.
They're,
Johnson, we'll have these niggers voting Democrat for the next 200 years.
mm. And this is what they don't get. I mean, Malcolm X, he said, look, they are playing you for a chump.
Yes.
You have no idea how much control they have over you. And then 2 days later, he was dead.
Oh, yeah, yeah. No, that was his last thing. If any black man who votes for a party like the Democrats, who has promised so much and failed to deliver on all of it, not only are you a chump, but you are a traitor to your race. Boom, dead. You
Yeah.
know. Um, it's amazing. It's amazing. Same thing with John F. Kennedy. Same thing with half the people who got killed. In the same year.
Mm.
And if you ask me, it was all probably the same people. It was the same MO with all of them, but
Yeah.
same patch almost. But
There's threads that connect these things over the years, and there's certain core concepts,
yeah, they never change.
patterns that you start to see coming up time and time again. And you'd think that they would alter these things because it does become so easy to follow. But they don't. They have the same old toolbox that they keep dipping back into time and time again. I mean, things like they're using the same actors and the same people popping up in the photographs and what have you. This is grade school stuff that anybody can pick apart.
Oh yeah, they haven't
But
caught up
then
yet.
you start to ask, is it set up in that way intentionally? Is it set up so that you'll ask questions about this, but then you won't ask questions about this? And the one thing that somebody noted to me recently, which was interesting, was that up until all this sort of Brexit thing started, you were constantly seeing on television footage of refugees coming in here, there, and everywhere,
Oh yeah.
and now you don't see it anymore.
Nope.
It's not being talked about at the moment, and it, you start to wonder if this whole thing is being used as a useful distraction for people to not realize quite how bad the situation in Europe is becoming.
Or even scarier yet, that it's normalized to the point where the people have just accepted it as part of everyday life.
I mean, Paris is a jungle at the moment. It is really quite scary. Yeah, there's video footage of girls being beaten to within an inch of their life by
Jesus.
mobs. It's not pretty what's going on over there. And don't get me wrong, the media does sensationalize these things. They do blow up these things, but the reality is, it is happening time and time again. And nobody's by any stretch of the imagination saying that you should be turning your back on people that are running from um, situations that are dangerous to them. But we have to say refugees, not economic migrants. That's the only answer to this situation. And we had it with the Eurotunnel the other day, right before the Brexit vote. You had a lot of migrants throwing rocks and screaming "fuck the UK," trying to get in before the Brexit vote happened.
Wow.
And even the BBC buried the story. They stuck it in a blog somewhere. They didn't want to put it on the front page because that would have influenced the vote. And the BBC's always been very pro EU. And the way a lot of information was covered up, the reality is the European army will be announced. I can guarantee you this.
Yeah,
It will be announced,
I'm surprised it's not
and
already be happening.
Turkey's Turkey's succession as a European country will be announced. They just don't want to announce it just yet. They've probably delayed it by a couple of weeks now just to let everything die down and then they'll come back with it.
If oh,
Because otherwise they would literally be proving that they're not going to come out with it until we've triggered Article 50 because then by then it's too late.
well,
And
David
we can't
Cameron.
really kind of vote it against it. Um, but both things will come through. And they will do it in such a way that, as I say, we are too far gone to cast a veto on it. But they are coming. And the concept of European army is genuinely scary. I don't like the idea of it. We would lose all control over our own armed forces, which would mean, at the end of the day, we are not able to defend ourselves because they could choose to deploy our large sections of our military in certain places, and then we're vulnerable to attack if something
And you
happens.
guys don't have guns
Um,
either.
well, our military does, and
Well,
our
I mean the
police
people.
do to a certain extent, but no, not the populace. I mean, you can get shotguns and things like that and antiques, but antiques aren't really going to be much good when you're coming up against people with AK-47. They don't tend to have the same fire rate.
No.
Um, but yeah, it's the things that European Union were doing were scary, and people have to understand this. That yeah, there was some racists that wanted to say get rid of all the group of people, whoever it may be.
Yeah, but they're clearly not going to
Um,
get what they want.
they're the minority. They really are the minority. The media loves to play it up and make a huge deal out of it and so on and so forth. But they were our equivalent of the useful idiots.
So, so,
And they allowed us to push through something that is going to help the people
so
of
while we're on
Britain
that
and is going to
topic,
help the people of Europe, hopefully.
what's your understanding of Britain First and the EDL? Are
Um,
they as racist as everybody says? Because I mean, I don't know much about the EDL. I've seen a couple of their videos. They didn't seem to be saying anything remotely bad or anything. Neither did Britain First, but I could be wrong. I'm not in the UK.
you, I'm not a fan of either group personally. Um, I think they, I do think they cause division. I think they put themselves in situations where they are going to get an argument.
Right.
And I think they are as guilty as the other group because they are looking to. If you walk into a bar in the middle of Harlem and shout the M word, you're going to get your head kicked in.
Yeah, pretty much.
You can't then say, oh, it was because I'm white. No, no, you put yourself in a situation. And that doesn't mean it's right for them to do it to you, but you put yourself in that situation. You provoked it. And that's the difference. They will sort of go to predominantly Muslim areas. They will walk through and they will provoke it. And the reactions they get are not good. And we have to work on that. But I wouldn't say I personally fully support either of them. I wouldn't say I personally support them at all because I don't think we need that. I think we need to be coming together and saying, you know what, all the people that are here, we're all going to try and fucking work together. I think the Muslim community needs to give a lot. It needs to stop refusing any kind of criticism. It needs to open itself up more. The language barriers are always an issue. So for me, really, as an independent Europe, an independent UK, free from EU legislation, we should be saying if you want to come here, you must learn the language. End of story. I don't.
Yeah.
Uh,
See,
there is no greater barrier between communities than language.
yeah, it's everything.
If you can't speak to people, you can't get to know them, you can't get the motivations, and oftentimes if they're speaking another language, you do feel like you're not getting and understanding what's going on, and then you start to get the old paranoia setting in, and that's where a lot of the racism comes from, is that people can't hear what's being said, so they assume that something's being said about them.
Well, racism by
Um,
itself also it gets a very interesting rap because racism is a very interesting concept. I mean, evolutionary psychology would tell you that racism is bred into you at an instinctive level. It's not so much that they're a certain kind of race. It's more that, back in the day were rather large homogenous groups. When you had, I suppose, three or four nations next to each other, white people, and you find a Arab or a black guy or a Chinese guy, like what's he doing here? Is he a spy? Is he from an enemy force? Is he just a merchant? You don't really know, and I think that's really where it comes from. Just not really knowing that person, not knowing what they're about. You have nothing in common with that person. So it's a common thing. The only way to fix it is to, introduce, I guess, more of a dialogue or more of a get to know you kind of situation. The problem is when you have groups of people, like let's say these migrants, who their allegiance is first to the nation that they came from and their ideology, which is incompatible with Western ideologies,
mm.
and they refuse to ever assimilate. That's a problem to me. Like,
Well, you can see this most in Germany,
yeah,
because they have a large Turkish population, and the sort of German Turks and what have you, and they consider themselves Turkish always before German,
that's a problem.
and yet they're living in Germany.
See, my whole thing
That,
is,
that
yeah,
that is a fundamental problem. That is that, and it's one of the reasons that I personally disagree with Sharia because it's a parallel set of laws. It's saying that this religion, the laws of the land do not apply to me if they contravene what it says in this religion, and you can't live like that.
you absolutely
That
can't.
you've got women that are sort of put into marriages that are overseen only by because they're polygamous because polygamy is illegal over here. They have them done in Sharia courts and what have you. And the problem then is that within the Muslim faith you can divorce. You just have to say I divorce you 3 times and that's it. You're done.
Pretty much.
And these women have no legal recourse whatsoever. They could be left penniless. Now, if they do go to the Sharia councils, then they can get a settlement sometimes, depends on the council and their opinions. But it's also said that a woman can only have half of what a man is entitled to, which means that when they divvy up the marital assets, if they do, then at the absolute best, she's getting a third of what's there, not half.
Right. And I don't know if I
And
ever,
that's
yeah,
difficult.
I don't know if I necessarily believe in the whole half thing, anyways, but at least in this situation where you're getting screwed in every possible sense and this is religious law, then yeah, in that case, maybe she should get a little bit more. Um, just because, again, she has no recourse and, it's mostly
But
a
the other
religious
problem that you
thing.
have is they have a very big purity culture as well.
Oh, she'll
So
never
once a
marry
woman
again.
has been divorced, she will find it harder to find another man.
Yeah.
Much harder than you would in sort of Western cultures
Well,
and other sort of
she'll find a
settings.
man, but she'll find him outside the faith, at which point her family would disown her or possibly kill her. Yes.
Mm. And this is what scares me about this particular ideology, and it comes back to the old thing. Racism fundamentally is wrong. Disagreeing with an ideology, disagreeing with the
That's
precepts,
not
the concepts
racism.
that are put forward by it. And again, I mean, it's a fucking cliche these days to say not all, but not all, because different people will have different levels of interpretation of the faith, which is why you criticize the faith, not the person,
Absolutely.
because you don't know how. I mean, you've got people like Majid Nawaz. He is helping. He is a Muslim man, and he is willing to address the problem, and he is willing to say this is something that's going on in our community, and we need to solve it.
You see,
And that is somebody that is a help to the situation. But the fact of the matter remains that you don't solve the situation by changing people. You solve the situation by changing the religion because the religion is informing the people.
yeah, it's the linchpin. And the problem that I have, though, with the reformation of the religion is that there's already a nuclear option clause within the religion. It's called the taqiyya. Basically, they are allowed to lie, misrepresent the Quran, perform blasphemous acts, deny Allah or Muhammad under certain circumstances, which are basically to preserve life and limb, to preserve their, make sure they don't get beaten up or whatever or injured, or they can do it to get an, you know, uh, what's the word I'm looking for, a leg up on the enemy or on the infidel. So the problem that we're having is that there are people like Anjem Chowdhury who are actually very, very honest about what they believe, but you also have people who will flat out, just say Islam is a religion of peace. Oh no, no, the verse of the sword does not exist, but you can turn, to that right Shura. I believe it was what Shura 9 something or other, and you can find it where it says, just strike them above the neck and strike off every digit. You know,
The classic one that people always refer to is the it would be to kill one man, it would be as if killing all of mankind and all this sort of stuff. And they ignore the verse that comes directly after it, which
oh
says
yeah,
that you will go forth and you will kill any man who makes mischief in the land and acts against Allah. Well, as the Muslim religion defines it, to act against Allah, if you follow another faith, you're acting against Allah. If you're an atheist, you're acting against Allah. If you are not a Muslim, you are acting against Allah.
it's
So it is a blank check. Now, the majority of Western Muslims are moderate, and they will look at that and they will say, well, um, someone who acts against Allah is somebody who directly attacks Islam or this or that or the other, and they'll take a more reasonable bent on it. But we have to come to the realization as nations that the moderate Muslim is a Western phenomenon. It is not like that in Afghanistan. It's not like that in Iran. It's not like that in Saudi Arabia, and it's not like that in Syria.
well, because they're not really
These are
Muslim.
very different concepts. And you will see the same thing. I mean, you go to somewhere like Poland, and they are very, very, very strict Catholic to the point where they're talking about banning abortions and what have you. And then you come to somewhere like England, and we are technically speaking a Christian nation. We have more atheists than anywhere else. We have very relaxed, tolerant views on things, and so on and so forth. You have different levels of interpretation, but that's what makes the migrant crisis so terrifying. Is the fact that these are not second generation Muslims. These
No,
are
they're not.
not moderate Western people.
These are Islamists.
This is We are directly importing the bad kind,
And
and
yeah,
in some cases they are perfectly good people. Um, but a lot of them aren't. And a lot of them have come from, as I say, very barbaric cultures. And it's almost like dropping a caveman in the middle of a shopping centre.
that's exactly what it's like. And it's funny. I mean, you have so many videos explaining what Islam is, and whenever you say a moderate Muslim, he's not really a practicing Muslim. The only practicing Muslims in the world right now are ISIS because they're following it to the letter. You know,
Mm.
but that's wrong to say. That's wrong speak. But then again, you have the guys who are making it very easy for us, like Anjem Chowdhury, talking about how they are literally waging jihad right now, but they're doing it by bringing in more people and reproducing at a higher rate. They want to vote in Sharia. Then you have that other crazy cleric in where was it? Was it Turkey? Where he was basically saying, "We will go," or no, it was in Germany. He was talking about, "We will come here. We will mate with them. We will basically take over through numbers." You know,
Well,
um,
Gaddafi said it a few years ago. He said that, the continent of Europe will be taken without guns, without bloodshed.
yeah,
Allah has presented this land to us, and we will take it without force.
yeah, and eventually, when they get more than 50%, they will vote in Sharia. This is their
Mm,
dream. And places like Dearborn, Michigan, or whatever, or was it Maryland?
mm.
I can't remember. I'm tired right now, but I'll post it. I'll fix it. Um, but yeah, no, you have these places where they're fundamentally just almost entirely made up of just radical Muslims. Where a group of they were doing a stupid thing. They went with their Jesus is Lord signs and Islam is bad signs and stuff like that. They went to an it was like a Muslim. festival or something like that. They were literally stoned.
Mm.
Bricks, bottles. Oh, and the police basically told them that if, like, first of all, they arrested nobody. They allowed the angry mob to run them down, basically bloody. And when they finally separated them from the mob, they basically told them they had a couple minutes to leave before they charged them with something.
Okay.
Yeah, so now we have American cops who are basically saying, okay, well, if they want to act like barbarians, that's fine, but don't incite them. And it's like, that's basically like saying, that's like the dog catcher saying, oh, I understand there's a bunch of angry pit bulls all over the place that are tearing up children, but maybe our children shouldn't be in the streets.
Mm.
You know?
Well, it comes back again to this is the narrative that's being pushed by the aggressive left is that you can't blame victims, but you can blame victims if they are victims of protected cultures. And this is the progressive stack in action. This is your opinion is and your rights and your life are worth less than this person because of this arbitrary ruling. And it's not how it should be. It should be equality for everybody. And
Right.
the reality is, whatever you want to practice in terms of your religion, it is not a removal of your religious freedoms to say that your laws do not apply to me. Look at the listening party for that Radiohead album and what happened. They attacked these people because they were drinking during the month of Ramadan. Now, if you want to observe Ramadan, that's fine, but you can't force people that aren't Muslims to observe your laws.
No. And speaking of Ramadan, seeing as it is currently Ramadan and seeing as it's about to be election, let me tell you something right now. We should brace ourselves for more attacks because ISIS, like I said, follows the letter of the Quran. And that famous phrase, and kill them wherever you find them, well, the verse right before that said, and when the holy days are done, speaking of Ramadan,
Mm.
then it starts. And kill them wherever you find them, drive them out from wherever you've been driven out. This, that, and the other. Beleaguer them. Assault them, lay traps for them. So basically, the days after Ramadan, if they are really following the Quran, will be basically open season
Mm.
on the unbelievers and the polytheists, which is basically the rest of the world. So I would
That's
not
the
be
thing, though.
shocked if something
That's the thing
happened.
that I can't understand though. I mean, Ramadan is supposed to be the holy month and all that sort of stuff, but there are still bombings going on around the world. I mean,
I don't get it either.
you follow the scorecard on the religion of peace, and it's quite um, it's a contradiction in and of itself. And they keep saying, "Oh, well, these people took drugs, these people drank, and therefore they're not Muslims when they come out as terrorists." But the reality is, um, sometimes Jews eat bacon. Sometimes, you know, Catholics go out and have unprotected, sorry, and use condoms. People do break certain precepts of the rules, but that's again the fundamental difficulty with religions. People that they're so self-contradictory that there are 14 different versions of any passage that you can read, and you can use it to justify any kind of barbarism. Now, if this written book was written by God and is perfect and God knows everything, so on and so forth, the difficulty I have with it is why would He allow the wording of it to allow that interpretation? If He is all knowing, if the Quran is the perfect word of God, could He not have worded it in such a way that it couldn't be interpreted this way?
I think the situation is that we live in a different world, and this is probably where I'll draw some flack from a lot of Christians because I'm not gonna. Well, by the way, I am a Christian, but
Mm-hmm.
I tend to actually read the Bible and try to find the actual original meanings of things. And the strange thing is that the left will always attack Christianity without repentance and without remorse. And without ever really ceasing either. Christianity is okay. You can do Piss Christ all day long, just no problem. But you'll notice a distinct lack of bombings after Piss Christ.
Mm.
That's because in the Judeo-Christian traditions, that kind of reaction isn't condoned. You can't just go out there and just kill swaths of people over your
And you don't
religion.
have a situation where thou shalt not kill only applies to other Christians. And
Right.
that's the fundamental
It
thing.
applies to all
All of these
people.
things they quote don't apply to the kafir. They don't apply to the dhimmi.
No, and in fact the only way to be safe is as a dhimmi, as a slave.
But the dhimmi is clearly set up as a method to force people into becoming Muslims
Oh,
because
eventually,
you
yes. Eventually,
basically
you're gonna run out of
denigrate.
money. Yeah,
I mean, you talk about psyops, you talk about, again, old Uri's techniques and what have you, but it is a classic example of
oh, they're
that.
present.
It
Yeah,
is manipulation over time. And it is, I mean, there are specific passages where they say, well, you must humiliate them at every opportunity. You must always remind them that they are like animals. And they're not allowed to hold any positions of power. And this is why, again, the only comparable religion to Islam is Orthodox Judaism,
not even.
because Orthodox Judaism has its own courts. It sets up its own rules and laws that you
Oh yeah,
live
in that
by,
sense, yes.
and it is a complete. It is not so much. It is a religion, yes, but it is also a political identity.
Right, because again, the Jews they were a political entity. They were a nation. So in other words, that part of the Bible, the for them would be the Torah, and the Ketuvim, which would be the prophets, which would be Isaiah, Ezekiel, all
Mhm.
those. But the Torah itself is specifically there to be their constitution. It's specifically there to be their rule of law. So a lot of those laws you'll notice are harsh because they had to be because you lived in a barbaric culture. But when compared to every other religion and every other law on the planet, they were the most progressive. Like people like to say, oh, Christianity and Judaism, slavery is okay. And we're like, well, yeah, if you read it in English and if you stop reading after the word slave, basically there was no such thing as slavery in Israel. You had to release them every 7 years. And when you release them, they basically were Jewish citizens. And when you release them, they could actually choose to become part of the family at that point.
Mhm.
So it's apples and oranges. It's not like
It's very similar
roots.
to the situation that the Romans had, where people were granted citizenship after a certain amount of time of being a slave,
Right.
and people could
It's a
attain that, and they could be set free by their masters, and they could become. That's where the
If anything, it was a
uh,
good thing. It's a way of assimilation. It's something that we don't even have now with these people coming in, which is the biggest problem.
mhm.
They
I mean,
learn the culture.
I don't personally consider slavery to be a good thing in any scenario.
Well, no, you know what I mean. At the
But
time,
then
though,
you can draw parallels to things like people who live as butlers and what have you.
it's
And
exactly what it was. Yeah,
they had no lives of their own. They were on call 24 hours a day, and yeah, they were being paid, but their lives were not their own. And day off was a rarity and other such things. And they're not comparable situations to owning a person, but it shows you that there are degrees of these things. There are degrees of servitude, and
yeah,
I come back again to the fact that for everything that we did during the colonial times, and there were some very fucking bad things we did, um, we still have positive relationships with India.
yeah. That is a
Um,
beautiful thing.
the Commonwealth still looks on England with affection. We have a situation now that we've pulled away from the EU. Hong Kong wants to reunify with Britain.
I'm not surprised by that though. When you think about it, it's
It's
easier to align yourself with somebody you like when you don't have to align yourself with all their friends you hate.
mm, and that was always the other fundamental problem with the EU is that you had all these divergent economies. People say, "Oh, it's going to take us forever to get trade deals," and it's not. As a
It's gonna be
single
much quicker.
nation, it is so much easier. You are dealing with smaller quantities. You're dealing with a lot less variables. You're dealing with
The shitty
a single
in-laws.
common market.
Yeah.
It's like Android versus Apple. The reason Apple tends to crash less and what have you is because they know that there's one spec that they're working to, and they know that certain features are going to be in there no matter what. And where errors do occur, it's because it's an older model and therefore it doesn't have these new features. They can't handle this or that. But you are working to a fixed schematic. Whereas with Android, you're not. It's completely open. You can be working with 15 different varieties of interface. And that's the difficulty that you have with the EU. By becoming a single nation, we make it so much simpler for us to directly trade with these countries. The EU's been working on a trade deal with Canada for years. There's about 4 or 5 years worth of work gone into this thing, and it could get shot down by Romania because they are having arguments with the Canadian government over visas. And that is one small country within the bloc that is screwing over every other country because it has a personal issue with the country we want to trade with.
Yeah, and you know, getting closer to the wrap up here. It's amazing to me. Like I'm very grateful to the British people right now. I am, as an American. And it's always good to know that we're not alone in the world when it comes to situations like this. Because if you listen to the media, at least on our end, America is the most racist, xenophobic place on earth, for wanting stronger borders and asking the insane, horrifying, what's the word I'm looking for? Injustice. That if you're going to come to America, that you become an American, that you assimilate to the culture, and if you do not find that to be a possible thing, then to find somewhere else to go. Um, you know, I think that when you have situations like the Brexit, where it does the same thing, but it does it in a way that it removes the race aspect, where it wasn't even about that because you have so many different groups that are coming into the UK, rather than the United States is mostly Mexicans, um, and with Donald Trump, it's a lot of the refugees as well. But with the UK, you have so many people just coming in from all over the world, from Africa, Turkey, and also, I think it removes the aspect of race. So maybe I'm hoping that with the Brexit being the way it is, and coming out successfully, I'm hoping that it will open up the eyes of people in America to go, it's okay to ask for a little bit of control.
Well, look at the stats. The reality is, a lot of the people that were voting for Brexit were Hindus, Sikhs.
Yeah,
I know a lot of continental Europeans that voted for Brexit because they could see that, the economy was straining and that they were perfectly content because they were already in. And we are not going to turn around and turf out all those people who have come here,
right.
because those are the people that have helped to make Britain great over the last couple of years. It's not a question of getting rid of everybody else. It's a question of saying control what comes in. And
Exactly.
you do see support from the Hispanic community. You don't see as much as you get for Hillary, but you do see some support coming from the Hispanic
Oh yeah,
community
Latinos for
for
Trump is getting
Trump
loud.
because they see that this cannot go on forever, and they see that their situation is going to be screwed up if it carries on.
Oh, I am Hispanic. My dad was an illegal immigrant who was granted amnesty by Reagan, and believe it or not, I wouldn't have even been okay with that because it
Mm,
weakens the country as a whole. I mean, it's sheer hypocrisy, like I
exactly.
said. You don't come to ruin and drain the country that you swear you love.
Mm. But you see people sort of burning American flags and waving Mexican flags, and it's like, well,
Well, then go back to
this is
Mexico.
years of pent up frustration just getting vented all in one go. And it's not helping anybody. It's not creating, it's dividing communities and it's not creating something cohesive. And guess what? When you go out and you riot and you do this, every time they do this, every time fucking Black Lives Matter go and rip apart a city,
Yeah.
they are giving more excuse to the government to tighten up that jackboot on your neck and take away your rights and put more control in place. You are literally causing the necessary requirements for the government to be able to justify a police state.
Oh, better yet, that's the reason they let them run rampant. But what they don't realize is that by sitting there and quote fighting racism in the stupid ass way that they do, what they do is they breed more racism. I mean, you have Black Lives Matter walking out or like just running around the streets, burning down cars, twerking in the middle of the road, swinging their babies around in fucking like food stamp houses. I mean, dude, you are literally embodying every single horrible stereotype that has ever been said about black people. You know what I mean?
Mm,
Like you are acting like a bunch of apes. You know, if you sit down and in a calm way, have a discussion about your grievances, and if they happen to be legitimate and you are open to them not being legitimate, and we have an actual conversation, I think it would be better. But no, what they want to do is they want to go out and riot. They want to cause a huge scene because they want to act the way that they've been pretty much programmed to. Same thing with the Hispanics. The vast majority of them, they get their news from Univision or Telemundo or any one of those stupid ass places. By the way, I am Hispanic. So I happen to know. I grew up watching this garbage. Let me tell you, Hispanic news is crap. The stuff they say is all lies. They were trying to say that Trump was going to deport all Puerto Ricans. To where? To the United States?
To,
Puerto Rico is the United
Trump
States.
has been very clear from the start. It's not about getting rid of people. It's about cutting off entry. He's even said that the resident Muslim population will not be asked to leave. He's just saying we're not going to take any more people until we know what's going on.
Hell, I
We're
wouldn't want to
not
take
going.
anyone from anywhere for the next 20, 30 years. If it were up to me, I'm worse than Trump. I would have said, hey, fuck it. Borders shut down right the fuck now. No incoming flights, no visas. You know, go ahead and
Mm.
shut down all trade outside. We will only sell, you know, and that would have very good effect. But you know what? No, we have to be cooperative with other countries. I understand this. This is why he's entirely 100% correct. We need to control what comes in. Maybe for the right now, maybe we need to staunch that a little bit until we figure out how to
There's
do
going to be
this.
times when you need extra doctors. There's going to
Of
be
course.
times when you need builders. Yeah, there's going to be times when you need carpenters. There's going to be times you need plumbers,
Yeah, and at those
and that's
times we put them
where
in.
that's
Yeah.
why Britain's pursuing this Australian style point system because you can regulate it and you can say, well, at this point in time we need mechanics. So we'll take mechanics from all over the world. At this point in time, we need doctors, we need nurses, we need this. And you can specify, it's almost like being a recruitment company and
That's
putting out
exactly what it
adverts
is.
for jobs.
That's exactly what it is. And you know what? It exists as it is now, but it's never used because we have such porous, controls. For example, I know somebody, um, you know, I don't want to say what proximity, obviously, but this woman she was a lawyer in her country.
Mm.
I think it was, I don't know if it was Guatemala or I don't know, I forget. I don't really know her that well, but she was a lawyer, and now she works for less than minimum wage here,
Mm.
and
You see all the time taxi drivers that were doctors in their home
exactly.
countries and what have you.
Exactly. But if you set up a situation where we start having the conversation that Trump wants to have, which is how many and what makes sense, and should it be easier for certain regions, then yeah, if we have those conversations, maybe they'd be better off. I have a friend in Venezuela that I would love to have here as a political refugee or in any sort of way, in a legal fashion as a doctor because she's studying to be a doctor, and Venezuela is falling apart. But you know what? Is that reasonable? Is that a thing that we can accommodate right now? Who the hell knows? But that's a conversation we need to have. And no one else wants to have it. It's either you open the floodgates and you open it to the wrong fucking part of the world. Because I'm telling you, they're not going to open it to South America. They're going to open it to Africa. They're going to open it to Somalia, Saudi Arabia, places like this, where you have people who will, quite honestly, never be able to contribute to society here. And if they do, it'll be far few between because it takes a certain level of tenacity to actually get there. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I've heard of guys who come here from, let's say, I don't know, Uganda or something, and they build a business. Next thing you know, they're millionaires. Great on them. But you know what? Again, that is the minority. The majority of them will have to learn English. They will have to learn a trade. Again, we're bringing in people who right now exist only on the contributions of people from nonprofit organizations. To bring them
Mm.
here to suckle on the teat of America, is a badass idea. You know, um, but again, to say this, it's considered racist, and I don't know at what point, you know, like how many cartel wars have to happen in Texas? How many buildings have to be blown up by Islamic terrorists? How many I don't know, home invasions have to be done by people who are just used to doing this in Colombia? You know?
It, this is the fundamental difficulty though, because you have the flow of information, you have the information that gets out, and you have the information that doesn't get out.
Yeah.
And if this is why, and I just will not understand this. This is why putting a name on it is important because then people can differentiate. People can see that at the end of the day, what always happens now, and it is an absolute universal truth with any of these shootings, is that the only thing that people are focused on is the race of the shooter. because the right wants him to be a Muslim and the left wants him to be a white guy. And because it's not being named, because it's not being pushed out, I was having this conversation with a journalist the other day, and the problem that we have is that you have created this callous culture where, with the Orlando thing, people were having to run straight in and say, "Well, we need to deal with this. We need to deal with the fact that he was Islamic and so on and so forth,"
Yeah,
because
gotta
the
parse
left
the
will come
information.
in and shut down that story as quickly as possible. So the tact has been removed because we have to speak before the narrative gets set, and
Yeah,
that's the real crime of it. You can't let the body get cold because in that time the narrative will have already been rewritten. It will be out there, and
it'll
the
evaporate.
unfortunate thing is, a lot of people when they're looking at these situations, the first piece of information they read is what they will believe because after that everything contradicts and they don't like that. They like the simple, easy to digest. This is my narrative. This is what I'm going to do, and you get this argument. I've had this argument when I'm in the run up to the Brexit thing. People, I would present information to them. No, I've made my mind up, and you're not going to change my mind. And I can put endless information in front of them, and they will not listen because the first narrative is the one that sticks.
It's terrific. That's a terrible thing, you know. Um,
It's a terrible thing because it shows the ignorance of people and the fact they're not willing to look further into things, deeper into things. But it is understandable because it's the confirmation bias in action.
well, again, and that's the scary thing too, because in the United States, it's the exact opposite. For example, the Joe Cox thing, right? The first thing everybody remembers: Britain first, Brexit, Remain, right? That's all they remember. They don't remember that later the guy said, "I never said that." Neither did the guy. It was never said. Britain first was never said. The guy didn't say
Mm,
anything. It was a fight. It had nothing to do with political aims.
yeah,
You know, whereas in the Orlando shooting, everything that happened in the first 15 minutes, the most accurate information that could have possibly been disseminated, disappeared. Multiple shooters, door blocked. How many people were actually injured? Who was actually there? Phone conversations about Islam. All these things disappeared, and
yeah,
all anybody remembers is, oh, he hated himself for being gay, and you know, this time we'll kind of say Islam because he was trying to purge himself.
mhm.
Uh, you know, it,
But that's looking at the complete picture rather than zoning in on one thing, and one thing makes the narrative simple, and it makes it simple to spin, it makes it simple to swallow. The people that were saying, look, this is a situation with Islam and so on and so forth, they weren't denying the fact that he was gay and that was causing internal conflict. They were very much pointing to the fact that he was gay and that was causing internal conflict because of his religion. But yeah, I mean, it's the way it's going. The narrative is very easy to set when you've got a certain viewpoints that you can home in on. Um, it simple stories. They're much easier to sell to the public if you can say, well, there is all this nuance, but we're going to ignore that. We're just going to focus on these two key facts. And this is why the news media in America, whenever there's a shooting, it's always an AR-15, even though it's never an AR-15, because if they keep repeating the same name over and over again, they get the brand recognition, they get that very simple, clean, uncomplicated narrative being pumped straight into people's heads, and they get their point made, and it becomes harder to pick it apart if you don't know what you're talking about. The more complex it gets, the more nuanced it gets, the more simple, very clean. Very weird.
yeah, you're back.
Okay, very clean narrative, and that's the way they do it, and that's why they sell it in that way, and that's why we can't have proper conversations anymore. Because when you have conversations, you get detail, you get nuance, and you get variability, and they don't want that.
Yeah. Well, here's to hoping that this this win, for humanity at this point, will shine a
Fingers
big
crossed.
beacon of light onto the dark corners of stupidity. You know.
We shall be a beacon of freedom to the world.
Amen. So it's good having you on, man.
Thank you very much for having me,
Yeah.
and I'll see you around.